Please note the location of the fire exits. Please make sure your mobile phones and other devices are switched to silent. The meeting will be live streamed and an audio recording will be made. Can I ask that people speak as audibly and as carefully into the microphone as possible to save me having more letters about members of the public who can't hear what we're talking about. So I think that's quite important. Please switch your microphone on when addressing the council and off when you have finished speaking. Please remember that COVID continues to be a concern, and obviously respect those who wish to remain suitably distanced or in masks. Because this will be a lengthy meeting, I suspect, we'll have a short break after about an hour and a half, so that people can have a comfort break and perhaps have a drink and something to eat. So those are my announcements. Welcome to Councillor Raby, who is here for his first council meeting. Prayers are taken by the Reverend Michael Hogg of Brighton Road Baptist Church. Michael.
Thank you very much, and greetings to you all. Let us pray. Our loving Heavenly Father, Lord of heaven and earth, we thank you for your commands to us in your Holy Scriptures to pray for those in authority with petitions, intercession and thanksgiving, that we may live peaceable and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. This is good and pleases God our Saviour. So we thank you, Almighty God, for the privilege of this day, being able to come before you in prayer through Christ Jesus, our Saviour and Lord. We thank you for our lives, our loved ones, our land in which we live. We thank you for meaningful work and responsibilities for our homes and community. We thank you that each one of us here is here today and able to serve you and serve others in this world you have loved and made. On this occasion, we also want to thank you for our Queen and give special thanks for her peaceable reign of 70 years. Grant her much grace, strength, wisdom and peace in these times ahead. We also pray that when we as individuals in our own lives or in our families, in our community or country, face times of shaking, hardship, trial or turmoil, that we would know your peace and provision as your divine purposes are outworked among us. Grant us much grace. Turn our hearts towards you. Lastly, I thank you for all of those who give of themselves sacrificially in service through the work of Horsham District Council, through other areas of service to the Horsham community. Thank you for their desire to serve others in whatever ways they are enabled and authorised to do what is good, peaceable and pleasing in your sight. I pray for all deliberations, discussions and decisions this evening that you will grant wisdom and insight to those who govern. Grant your help and strength and good understanding of all matters. I pray that through those gathered here in this place, you shall be bringing about your good purposes for the people of Horsham District. Thank you for your great love for each one of us, and I pray the peace of Christ Jesus to be upon each one and all proceedings. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Good. The first item, apologies for absence. I have Councillors Alan Britton, Philip Circus, Jonathan Chown, Christine Costin and Tim Lloyd. I'm not aware of anybody else. Thank you. The minutes of the 8th of December, the minutes of the other meetings that we have had, and we've had 3 extraordinary meetings held on the 3rd and the 8th of December, need to be approved. So can I move that the minutes of these meetings held on the 8th of December, the extraordinary meetings held on the 3rd and 8th of December be approved as correct records? And do I have a seconder? Thank you very much, Kate. And I will sign those minutes as a correct record. To receive any declarations of interest from members, do any members have interest to declare in respect of any item on tonight's agenda? No. Thank you. Announcements. I do have one announcement, and I put it here because it's quite important. This, as you are probably aware, is our present Chief Executive's last council meeting. And I can see the relief already on his face. It doesn't seem very long since you came to us. And if I can just give a little bit of background to Glenn's progress through various occupations. When Glenn came to us, he was currently Chief Executive of Epping Forest District Council in Essex, and he had substantial local government experience, having previously worked at Bath and North East Somerset District Council as a strategic director, I believe. And before that, it was the world of commerce and Deloitte, ICI, and latterly managing director or chief operating officer at Save and Invest. So a lot of experience in the commercial sector. There are two things I remember vividly about Glenn's interview. One, he said, "I'm not afraid to speak truth unto power." And my thought about that was, well, it'd be interesting to see how it goes. But I think he has spoken truth unto power and not been afraid to do so. And the other thing was the stressing of loyalty to his staff. And in difficult situations, I knew, and when I had meetings with Glenn as head of as the Lib Dem leader, I knew that he was intensely loyal and would back his staff in very difficult situations. So, Glenn, it's with great sadness that you will be leaving us, great anticipation of what will happen later. And I know that there are several other councillors here who wish to add to what I've said. And so I'm going to call on Councillor Ray Daw to say a few words.
I have to say that Glenn doesn't look very sad. Of all of us here, I probably have been the council member who has worked most closely with Glenn. So I begin by giving him my personal thanks. From the moment Glenn arrived at HDC, he entirely understood what the council's ambitions were. And throughout the time we were working closely together, I found we had an excellent rapport. He is always professional, easy to work with, has a good sense of humour. I found him supportive and yet challenging when he needed to be, with what I would describe as an objective, always, well, nearly always, calm approach to complaints about staff or HDC actions. For me, Glenn has all the qualities one would hope to find in an excellent CEO. When he joined the council, I gave him a brief to keep us financially secure, with no cuts to services, and to be a modern, agile, ambitious and innovative council, focused on improving our communities. He is driven to achieve those goals, and has tackled the many challenges with energy and, I think, great enthusiasm. The council's chief executive is ultimately responsible for an extensive mix of things. Of course, there will always be new challenges, but I feel as he approaches the time when he leaves us, he's got the council to where it needs to be. Running a council with what on occasion seemed like ever-reducing funds, was not easy. In spite of this, the councillors continued to provide this district with effective and efficient public services. At the same time, as one officer put it to me, Glenn has always been very supportive of staff and has always got our backs. I also understand that as a bonus, Mrs. Chipp's cakes are a real hit amongst staff at election time when she kept the staff going throughout the day, supplied with those cakes. I've never actually tasted one, Glenn, but Glenn, you can be genuinely proud you've steered us through some very tough challenges. These last unprecedented and now many months of the pandemic being a clear example of that. Throughout this current very difficult time, you've been forward-thinking, anticipating problems, and ensuring everything is in place to keep our residents and our staff safe, and local businesses protected where possible. We will, of course, lose Glenn's sound and reliable advice and guidance, but it's pleasing to see that he has given us a great team to deliver our future plans for the district. Jane is part of that team. She will be well placed to pick up the torch and carry on the foundation Glenn has left us and lead our residents to a good future. Glenn, thank you for being so steadfast in achieving all the goals that you set yourself at the council, and I wish you the very best for the years ahead and the most enjoyable retirement.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Chairman. Glenn, I never fully realised what a chief executive did until I was elected leader. I was aware of the ceremonial duties like this meeting, but for the rest had an imprecise view of what you did at the head of the council on the officer side. In May last year, that view changed abruptly. Dealing with the financial side of the council, and indeed in a perverse way, the planning issues, etc., was relatively simple, actually. The biggest problems were dealing with people and also getting to understand the organisation. Understanding how the council functioned in a more profound manner than that gleaned as a backbencher, or even actually as a cabinet member, and that was actually hard and tough. Then you made it much easier by being open and frank, as you've always been fair, and especially having a good sense of humour, which is absolutely necessary for the leader and for you as chief executive. Also, having a wealth of experience both in the public and private sector made my life as leader much easier and also brought a whole different aspect to the job. You've had excellent understanding of the people reporting to yourself in the organisation and a pretty shrewd idea of the number of councillors that are here present. You've also been able to walk that tightrope between dealing with the desiderata of elected members, what might be possible, or indeed prudent, and trying to make it happen, and backing us. You were a great help to me, and I've learned a lot from you about the council, its officers, and also about local government. You always had my back and our backs as councillors, and you also had the back of the officers and trod a careful path. I will personally miss you as you retire. I know that Jane will make an excellent chief executive, and I wish Jane all the very best in her new post. The new leader and his team will need to rely on SLT and the new chief executive as they build up their experience of their roles. Please join me in a vote of thanks for Glenn, an initial step. And what I would also say is, I don't know if it's done in council, but actually it's just happened just now. I was going to invite you to join me in a round of applause to thank Glenn, our retiring chief executive, for his council service and his service to us as councillors. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you very much. So we will record the votes of thanks, but from my perspective, thank you very much for your support and advice over several years. What people forgot to mention was that you are a dab hand at origami, and when he's bored or when he's in a serious meeting, this is the sort of stuff that he actually produces. So thank you very much. The next is leaders' announcements, but I suspect that Councillor Horsham has a few announcements.
Thank you, Chairman. I shall stand up. If you can't hear me, please do say so. I appreciate I'm very tall and there's microphones. It's been a strange week. You've probably all read the budget papers in advance, and the objectives that I hope come through from our budget are incredibly environmental. Our commitment to carbon reduction, carbon neutrality. In addition, the amendment that came around yesterday. Well, let's first of all talk about Monday. The Conservatives announced a £28 million household benefits to the energy bill rebate. This is obviously fantastic news. 80% of our households get a £350 budget. There's £150 council tax relief and £200 of energy bills. So that is obviously most welcome. On top of that, I'd like to give credit to our leader, who's unfortunately not here this evening. He has worked diligently with Paul Marshall from West Sussex over the weekend, on Friday, on Saturday, and you would have seen, for those of you that are aware, the addendum come out yesterday. And just to clarify the addendum is in addition to the budget, so all the recommendations on page 21 and 22 are continued, and the 3 recommended motions are in addition. The last 2 years, we've had a council rate reduction scheme that helps our less fortunate, that helps our less vulnerable. It helps reduce their payments by up to 90%. The County Council were requested by Horsham Council to continue that this year, to which they didn't feel able to commit. Political pressure, and as I said, I'm going to give some credit to Jonathan Chowan, who is not here this evening, has enabled us to put this addendum through, giving an additional £150 relief to A to D council taxpayers within our district. So this is absolutely welcome news. We'll cover it later in the evening, but I just wanted to announce that at the beginning of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 pieces of very good news that I wish to share with Council and with our residents. The REC ice rink, that's been a fabulous success, particularly in the build-up to Christmas and even just after. They're looking for alternative, bigger and better ideas. So by keeping the skating theme, certainly for Easter and onwards, looking to have skate rinks to provide roller skating, discos, roller derby and the like, and maybe have the ice rink future Christmases and winter periods. It's been a phenomenal success in terms of providing employment for those in our district, and it's provided, of course, a welcome income for this council. So it's been a win-win for everyone, and it's supported local businesses. It's got certainly lots of customers there from across the town and wider across the district. So I know those that are running it are especially grateful to the council, and we as a council are grateful to all the members who support us in that endeavour. And secondly, Chairman, I just wish to share our investment in the town centre and the public realm. Through the Pdag, and I met with the Horsham Society a couple of weeks ago, and I'm grateful to local members, Councillor Fletcher and others who met with me. We have now agreed our plan for Westway through over Black Horse Way and the Forum Walk for reinvestment. So the paving, having talked about skating, can't commit this council to any problems that may or may not have been on that paving, but it will be a very different and very different surface. It's one that everyone has been able to have an input into in terms of choice of colour and the type of the surface. That stone, the granite, it has to be quarried. There's about a 3-month lead-in time. So we're looking to do the work in phases. There won't be significant disruption to those that use the road or the footpath, because it will be broken up into phases. So that's going to be a big investment in our town centre, and it's one that I'm all excited for. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Roger Knoll.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be very brief. I'm pleased to make a short statement on behalf of the Leisure and Culture team to announce that we will soon be publishing details of the Queen's Jubilee celebrations that this council is organising for the residents and their guests in the Carfax on Saturday, June the 4th. Horsham District Council recognises the immense debt that this country and particularly this district, owes to Queen Elizabeth II, and welcomes the opportunity to celebrate Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee and the associated events surrounding this celebration during the forthcoming long bank holiday weekend in June. Not only will we be holding the planned resident street party in the Carfax, hopefully, with bands, parades, stalls and other entertainments, but we will also be organising a beacon to recognise this weekend amongst other events. One such event will be to utilise the Queen's Green Canopy incentive and to offer each parish and neighbourhood council the opportunity to celebrate this Jubilee by donating a tree to be planted later in the year in each of these locations. Further details are being finalised by our working group of cross-party councillors, and residents of Horsham District will be advised fully of our plans in the coming weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Noel. Are there any other statements? No. Which brings me to the Chief Executive's announcement. And I'm handing over to you again.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I head into the sunset, I wanted to take this opportunity to say a few thank yous and leave you all with a piece of final advice, as this will be my last meeting as the Council's Principal Policy Advisor. It's been a privilege to work with the fantastic team of officers in Horsham. I've told them many times how highly I rate them, but I wanted to use this opportunity to put my thanks to them on the public record. They've made my job far easier than I could have anticipated when I joined the Council 4 years ago. Back in April 2018, when I joined the Council, Ray Daw sent me 12 objectives. I won't bore you with the full list, but I'm proud to say 10 out of 12 have been delivered by the team at Horsham. And by team, I include councillors and officers in that word. The two remaining outstanding, well, the first one was to progress the redevelopment of Shoreham Cement Works, which actually we don't own, and we don't have responsibility for planning for that area, even though it sits in our district. I didn't realise that at the time, so thanks for that objective, Ray, but I do regard that one as rather a hospital pass, and I'm not sure we ever could deliver it. But Jane, maybe you can succeed where I failed. The second one, actually what I should say is I do understand why Shoreham Cement Works was on the list, and something does need to be done about it. I just think it's an intractable problem for us. The last objective was the local plan. Little did we know back in 2018 that we'd be facing multiple changes to NPPF some days before we were about to come to Council with a Regulation 19 plan, a global pandemic, and a declining rare snail species, all of which have contributed to delays in our local plan. So that objective at the moment is still outstanding. That said, I believe Council now has a golden opportunity to adopt a local plan with a significantly lower housing number than was previously possible. The effect of water abstraction on the habitat of that rare snail has impacted not just our plan, but the plans of Crawley and Chichester too. Natural England's statement on water neutrality has effectively halted all development in the affected area, which means that our housing trajectory cannot now meet government targets. It's just not possible to hit those targets. That's a completely new scenario, despite what you might read in the letters pages of the West Sussex County Times. But that does provide us with an opportunity to go for a lower housing number. So my final piece of advice is, don't screw that up. That's a golden opportunity. And I advise you to listen to the council that the council itself is engaged, and not to self-appointed experts. and you need to adopt the Regulation 19 plan as soon as you possibly can, because the mitigation plan to solve water neutrality will be on us more quickly than you think. But the thing to remember, councillors, is that at the end of the day it's only advice. The difficult decision on the local plan, and I don't envy you that decision, rests with you. So I want to close by saying how much I've enjoyed working with councillors. Some more than others, it's got to be said, but I'm sure that cuts both ways. My reflection on that period is that given the complex issues that the district council deals with on a day-to-day basis and the range of political views in the room, it's no great surprise that from time to time I've disagreed with some of you in this room. On occasion, that has led to full and frank exchanges of opinions. I make no apologies for that because, as David has said, my job is to speak truth to power. But neither do I harbour any ill feelings about those exchanges. You all have a tough job, and I've witnessed the abuse that you put up with for very little remuneration. I've often wondered why you actually do it. You must be mad. But of course, the answer isn't about money. It's about giving back to the community that you are part of. And you have my admiration for doing that, whether I've disagreed with you or not. Thank you all for putting up with me over the last 4 years. I'm delighted that the Employment Committee has recommended an internal candidate to replace me, not least because it makes the handover so much easier, but also because you are going to hopefully confirm later this evening a very capable Chief Executive, and she will be supported by a fantastic team. And I wish her and all of you all the best for the future.
Glenn, I hope that before you do finally leave, we might be able to meet socially with councillors and staff as well. Questions from the public? There are no questions relevant to the business of the meeting, and therefore I move on to pages 21 to 24 on your agenda. Recommendations from the Cabinet which were made on the 27th of January. The 2022-23 budget and the medium-term financial strategy to 2025 and 2026. The item on the budget and the setting of the council tax is in two parts. The recommendations of the Cabinet in respect of the budget for 22-23 are set out, as said, on pages 21 and 22. The council tax resolution and statutory calculations, which have to be approved by council, are set out on pages 25 to 33. I think if you're on the app, it's pages 27 to 35. The council tax resolution will be considered straight after the budget, and we will return to the three remaining recommendations from Cabinet afterwards. Please note that the Local Authorities Standing Orders England Amendment Regulations 2014 require the council to take a recorded vote in respect of any decision relating to the budget and the setting of council tax, including any amendments to the recommendations. I therefore invite Councillor Tony Hogben, Cabinet Member for Finance, to introduce the budget, to make his budget presentation and move the recommendations of the Cabinet, numbered 1 to 10 on pages 21-22. An addendum has been circulated with additional recommendations. The Constitution at 4A28G allows for an alteration to be made without notice with the consent of the meeting and the seconder. So I have to ask you, are you all in agreement that this addendum be accepted? Thank you. Councillor Richard Land, are you happy with that addendum? And you're happy to second the Councillor Hogben's statement?
I am.
case, Councillor Holden.
Thank you, Chairman. This paper introduces you the annual budget and the revised medium-term financial strategy following the government's financial settlement. The key points to note in the budget are: our budget requirements for 2022-23 is 12.188 million. This is 1.1 million lower than 2021-22 due to the gradual recovery of our operations from COVID lockdown, but still £1 million higher than pre-COVID levels. The provisional settlement is on a similar funding basis to last year. However, all indications for the government are that fairer funding, rebaselining of business rates, and new homes bonus changes will come in the budget in 2023-24. Given our strong council tax base and high levels of house building in recent years, we do expect this to impact us quite severely on our position. That said, our policies between 2016 and 2019 of removing all new homes bonus from our operational budgets means we're well prepared to weather this particular storm. The proposed council tax increase of 2.9% on 9 pence a week is September's CPI for a Band D property. This is a prudent level that balances our need for hard-pushed residents with the future risk to the council. Horsham District will continue to have the lowest council tax of any district or borough in Sussex and the lowest 25% nationally. I believe I calculated it actually 18% nationally, and even with the increase, our budget includes £1 million on environmental initiatives announced by a leader when he took over the role. This includes a lot of capital works to our buildings, our vehicles, such as LED lightings in the capital, some of our car parks, making our houses carbon neutral, and starting our programme of moving our vehicles to electric. It also includes extra staff to support our work with landowners in the wider green agenda. The budget includes £200,000 to spend on Horsham Town Centre, Year of Culture legacy projects. As we move through the pandemic, we can enjoy ourselves together again. The proposed capital programme totals £10 million. In addition to our decarbonisation works, this includes £958,000 for public realm works in Horsham. I believe Councillor Mitchell mentioned some of the work we've done. And continues to provide £1.25 million to help people live in their homes. The Director of Corporate Resources has advised that our reserves are sufficient for the 2022-23 revenue and capital budgets proposed to make risk around levelling up, business rates, fairer funding that are all planned for 2023. The cost of introducing food waste as required by the 2020 Environmental Bill is expected to be a minimum of £1.3 million. The Chancellor announced national measures in recent weeks to help with the rising energy costs, recognising the growing cost of living pressures was number one on the issue on people's mind, with the packages predominantly aimed at supporting hard-working families. We've also recognised this working locally alongside West Sussex County Council in the last few days and proposing that working age residents claiming forgive me, that comes back to my addendum. We will cover it in more detail in the council tax reduction scheme, but the proposal of the addendum that I put through was to help hard-working supporting families. The budget primarily has been speaking so far about our environmental agenda. The addendum is talking about delivering substantial cost savings to low income families that possibly need our help and further support.
Thank you very much, Councillor Holden. If I can just clarify the addendum, that is obviously a now substantive motion or recommendation to council. So when you are debating the budget, you also can include that recommendation to council, which is a substantive addition. Councillor Richard Land, do you wish to speak now, or do you wish to speak later in the debate?
I'd like to speak later.
In that case, I invite Councillor Louise Potter, leader of the minority group, to speak. Councillor Potter, you have a maximum of 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank Councillor Horsham for his report this evening. Thank you for that. And I'd also like to thank the officers for the huge amount of work that has gone into preparing this budget and the diligence and professionalism that they have shown. They have been of a great help to both me and my team in preparing for the important decisions that we must take this evening. As Councillor Boffey outlined in Cabinet in January, there were some good initiatives in the draft budget recommended by Cabinet. But what was lacking was the real appreciation of the challenges facing our residents and the district in the months ahead. Of particular concern to me and my colleagues are the need to go further and faster on combating the climate emergency, the cost of living crisis which is now upon us, and the implications of both of these issues for our homeless and housing strategy. We were grateful that Councillors Chowan and Hogburn were willing to meet with us to discuss these issues and our proposals for increasing investment in temporary accommodation, speeding up the decarbonisation process and these properties, and taking action to provide financial support to those of our residents who are most in need. It is clear that there are opportunities to do more with regard to decarbonising our temporary accommodation and adding greater flexibility to the portfolio. And we would like to contribute to this work in the coming months. We would like to see an acceleration in action, potentially with additional capital projects, long before next year's budget. However, when it comes to the cost of living crisis, it is clear that action is required now. And while we do welcome the Cabinet's 11-hour recognition of this, we feel there is still more that can be done. Make no mistake, the crisis point has been reached, and this is clear from the fact that even our current government realised the need to do something. However, as we have come to expect, they made a complete hash of it. They talk of £350 of assistance per household. In reality, more than half of this is a loan, and even the total won't come close to closing the gap between incomes and price rises. CPI inflation is now above 5% and is expected to climb beyond 7% in the spring. Indeed, the Bank of England is so concerned that this month it announced the first back-to-back interest rate rise since 2004. In January, we were concerned about the potential for energy bills to go up by more than 50% when the price cap is increased. In the last couple of weeks, our worst fears have been realised. The average cost of energy bills in our district in April 2022 is expected to rise over £1,300 per annum, almost double the figure for the previous year. Also in April, an increase in national insurance of 1.25 percentage points will cost workers with average earnings in Horsham district between £175 and £230 per year. As a group, the Liberal Democrats are pleased to see that the Conservatives have now accepted our proposal to extend the additional discretionary discount for another year. However, considering much of the funding will be coming from West Sussex County Council rather than HDC's considerable surplus or reserves, the Liberal Democrats remain committed to leaving no stone unturned in our search for ways to help our residents weather the storms of the cost of living crisis, particularly those most exposed to its impact. With that in mind, I wish to propose an amendment to the budget addendum circulated yesterday evening. The £150 cap on the discretionary discount is an overhang from the original scheme introduced 2 years ago and is an arbitrary guillotine to the financial support available to residents who qualify for council tax reduction. In many cases, £150 will be sufficient to extinguish the council tax cost to households for the next year, but in many others it will not. A Band D property in Horsham Town qualifying for 90% council tax reduction, even after the £150 discount, will still be left with a bill of around £47. In Stenning, the figure would be £57. We believe this is unnecessary and that for the coming year it would be of enormous relief and encouragement to such households to know that for the next year at least, government was not one more bill they had to worry about. We want to be on their side, not part of the problem. Therefore, I propose to amend the cap upwards from £150 to £210 and increase the total budget from £120,000 to £300,000. This step would mean that no working age claimant living in a Band D or lower property in our district who qualified for council tax reduction would have to worry about their council tax bill for the next year. Those in a property in Band E or above would also benefit from an increase in support. It is unlikely the total cost of this scheme would be as high as £300,000, and it is worth bearing in mind that in 2021 to 22, the council set aside £250,000 in the community fund. which was unused but remains as an earmarked reserve. If last year we were able to stand ready to come to the aid of partner organisations, surely this year we can offer the same assurance to hard-pressed residents. Finally, the impact of this proposal would reduce the projected 2022 to 2023 surplus per the Cabinet report, which excludes the £150 proposed in the addendum, from £716,000 to £416,000. It is clear that the scheme is affordable. So the specifics of the amendment I'm putting forward are as follows. In recommendation 1 of the addendum, replace £150 with £210 and insert the words within the confines of the overall budget for the scheme at the end. And in recommendations 2 and 3 of the addendum, replace £120,000 with £300,000. I hope councillors will support the amendment and bring much needed hope to those of our residents most in need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Potter. Do you have a seconder for your amendment? That's Councillor Boffey. I have to deal with any amendments as they arise and one by one, so I'm going to deal with this amendment, and I'm going to ask that the order of speaking is the proposer of amendment. Well, that is Councillor Potter, and I think she's already spoken. The seconder, other members, and a final speech of reply by the Cabinet member. So for this amendment, we have heard Councillor Potter, and unless you have anything else to say, I will call your seconder at this stage, or do you wish to leave it to the end?
Prefer to leave it to the end before the right of reply, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. In that case, it is open for other members to comment about this amendment. I hope you've all got the figures or had time to write them down, bearing in mind that the substantive was the first amendment, or no, the first addendum, sorry, which was to approve an additional council tax support discretionary discount of up to 150, and this is changing the figures to 210. So I'm going to throw it open and start the debate. Yes, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to what both Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Finance have said, and Councillor Potter has said, and I think there are some facts that need correcting. I think the first one should be is that the £200 for every resident, every person in this room this October off their energy bills, £150 for every house band A to D off their council tax, and both, in addition to this, both county and district are reconfirming their commitment to helping out those most in need by extending the extra £150 reduction for a further year. This is the Conservative administration at every level of government, both national and local, understanding and taking into consideration the cost of living increases. I, as a young working person, am experiencing this firsthand myself. And this is support for those who need it most. All this, as a council, as we deliver the £1 million for decarbonising the council, which was the leader's first announcement in a meeting that the Liberal Democrat group did not turn up to. His first announcement was the £1 million for decarbonising the council and increasing biodiversity across the district. It is why my position as Cabinet member was created. It is at the very core of what we do. All this whilst delivering a balanced budget with a surplus. However, in 2 years' time, we'll be experiencing a deficit. And this small increase we are making comes out at 9p a week for the household. And that is meaning that's including the ones that don't have to pay because of the reduction scheme that we've already extended. And to the comments about whether or not we can decarbonise faster and whether or not we're doing enough, I will say to you that we have a target as a council. We declared a climate emergency in 2019. People forget that. We did. If you read the notice, we've already made great progress in the last 2 years, and later this spring we'll be coming out with our 3-year plan to take us to that next step. That includes improving our properties at great cost, and that's why we need to do it steadily and with well thought out research plans, rather than striving ahead and spending money where it could be spent better elsewhere. And as I previously mentioned, although we have a surplus now, will not be in 2 years' time. And that's why I think the recommendations already brought by the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Finance are so important.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to? Yes, Councillor.
Yes, I would like to make three brief points on this. To the negative way that Councillor Potter has portrayed this budget. One is that we're only in this position because of the prudent management of the Council finances over many years of Tory administrations here. And this has given us a strength which I think would be the envy of many, many other councils. And that I also think that we're also here because partly we have had quite generous allowances from central government during COVID. Now, with that, I suspect the neighbour to number 10, number 11, is looking at this and thinking, we can get some of this money back to balance the budget a little bit more. So I think that we should bear that in mind before we start spending any more money. My second point is that we must remember this is not council money, but taxpayers' money we're talking about, for which we all contribute. And thirdly, is it not typical of the arrogance of the hard left masquerading as liberals? Yes, exactly, you may well laugh because it's true, that they believe they know better how to spend people's money than they do themselves. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Potter. Yes. Oh, Croker, sorry, I was
Thank you, Chair.
misreading your name.
Confused there. Well, confused than usual, in fact. I'd just like to point out to Councillor Wright that the £200 is a loan. Now, I didn't ask for a loan. Anybody else? No, I thought not. It's not a gift. And the second point is that if the Conservative government had not removed the Code for Sustainable Homes in 2016, there'd be roughly 1 million people far better off with their heating bills than they are today. So I will be supporting the motion, the amendment. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chairman. I support the Cabinet Member's recommendation. I cannot support the change that's been proposed. I think that the remark from the Leader of the Opposition that the Cabinet and leadership lacks real appreciation of the situation is most erroneous and fact shouldn't be said. I think they have a very good understanding of what's going on. The reality is that, and it's partly because of our drive towards net zero and the rest of it, that we've created this energy crisis, which is causing the need for providing funds to people who are in difficulties. It's as simple as that. And I think, therefore, you go on and on about more decarbonisation, etc. But at the end of the day, unless we've got energy, we're doomed, which is the expression we've heard before. Yes, we want to save the planet, of course. We want to do sensible things. I think the Cabinet ought to be commended on the efforts they are taking to take steps. I mean, we're such a small player, but nevertheless, we are trying to be positive in moving forward with an agenda that's very difficult for us to do because it's going to cost. I mean, the jolly old slop buckets was going to cost $1 million a year. Then I saw 1.6, so I'm guessing now it's going to go towards 2 million. Everybody probably forgets, we shouldn't, that we lost £1 million a year in recycling credits from the county. To this day, I'm still waiting to find out why and where those funds originated from. There's a suspicion they were monies given to county by government, but this has been denied, and that was taken away from us. For a council our size, those are substantial sums of money. Let's say the Slop Bucket project. We saw the press release today that came out. It's full of very interesting statistics. It certainly seems to suggest that it will be a very useful project by the council. It's going to cost 1.6 to 2 million. This money doesn't come off trees. So the council is doing its best to assist the citizens, as always done, to maintain Horsham as one of the best places to live in the world, keep the council tax low, and not take it to the land. So I think some Lib Dems here are probably not aware that in 1999, when they were in power, they did increase council tax in 1 year by over 20%. And then they wonder why they weren't re-elected. So I totally oppose this amendment. I certainly support the Cabinet members' recommendations, and I hope that the other members will do the same. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Yes, Councillor Roger Knoll.
Thank you, Chairman. I've just got a very simple statement to make. I don't support the amendment, I'm afraid. I do fully support the budget that's been put forward by Councillor Hogben. This has been looked at very carefully over the last few months. We have produced a very prudent budget, bearing in mind that in 2 years' time, we're not going to be in the same position as we are presently. We've been very fortunate. We have handled our finances exceptionally well over the last couple of years, but we have to look to the future. This council has got to prove to the district that it can be fiscally responsible. If we now start giving money away irresponsibly, then we won't be trusted in the future. We have to be a responsible and accountable council. As I said at the start, this has been looked at very carefully. We have looked at all the options and we have decided to make the decisions that we have. I'm afraid that I have to support every single thing that our administration has put forward, and I cannot possibly support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beers.
Thank you, Chair. I was delighted when this addendum was tabled tonight. As Harold Wilson famously said, a week is a long time in politics. At Cabinet, there was no sign of this. Yet here we are today with both sides of the chamber broadly supporting the addendum, albeit that we do seem to be disagreeing about detail. So I would like to support Councillor Potter's amendment, mainly because it's more generous than £150, which was an entirely arbitrary figure in government guidance when they gave out grants 2 years ago to enable us to change council tax then. But I see it as administratively better. If we go for the amendment, it'll avoid council tax debt being below the de minimis level for collecting through the court process. It will avoid revenues and benefits having to try and manage small debts, and it will also avoid the unfortunate situation where some taxpayers will pay the small amount that they owe and some will not and get away with it. It avoids taking through small debts through the write-off process as well. And in answer to Councillor Donnelly, yes, when there was a Liberal Democrat administration 20 odd years ago, we did raise the council tax enormously, but we had a 13 million hole in the council pension fund at the time, and we didn't have any option. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Anyone else before I ask Councillor Buffy? Councillor Buffy.
Thank you, Chairman. How very interesting. As an 80-plus-year-old man living in a flat in Warner at the moment, who is probably laughing his socks off at the fact that his son's just been called a radical member of the hard left. Especially seeing his father, despite the fact he was a Liberal in the old days, and he did work for the council, looking after the parks. And he was a trade union member, but he got run out of the trade unions because he wasn't really into that kind of radical nonsense. So very interesting. Also yes, correcting a few facts, that's interesting, isn't it? It's £350. It's £200, it's a loan, as Councillor Kroger actually pointed out. And interesting, they're talking about the points to do with the decarbonisation. I don't know if anybody noticed, but we actually said we'd like to work with you talking about that. We're talking about the amendment here to the council reduction, guys, tax reduction, guys. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. just, didn't actually say anything about the council tax rate for this year, talking about council tax reduction. But I'd very much like to thank Jane and Dominic and their colleagues for their support since I took over the Shadow Finance brief. And as I've prepared for this budget process, they've shown such professionalism, commitment and dedication to their work, as well as the value I prize most highly in public life, integrity. I really am most grateful to them. I would also like to extend my thanks to the revenues and benefits teams who Councillor Bevis was referring to there as well, who've been working incredibly hard to get ready for the council tax billing process. This is a job which is hard enough in itself without having people like me throwing extra questions and proposals into the mix. Furthermore, they've been left in the awful position of having to incorporate additional support measures on the fly. Yeah? No tier of government has covered itself in glory in the initial response to the cost of living crisis. From Rishi Sunak with his dodgy buy now, pay later energy loan, to our Conservative County Council not being interested in extending the discretionary discount until the 11th hour this week, to our own Conservative Cabinet. We didn't dream of giving unilateral support to residents until the wet behind the ears Lib Dem from Trafalgar called them out. When I called for continued support to residents facing soaring bills, it was based on three basic reasons. People needed it, the council could afford it, and helping those in need is as much as we're able to is the right thing to do. It's pretty simple, really. Like Councillor Potter, I was pleased to see our proposal for the £150 scheme finally accepted by Cabinet. However, our initial proposal for this was to be funded by HDC, given that County had signalled their unwillingness previously to take part. That was affordable. Clearly the lion's share of the funding is now coming from County, and once they belatedly acknowledged the need for action, HDC risked being left as outliers if they didn't get on board pretty sharpish. That being the case, HDC can afford to do more, and once again, if we can, we should. Even with our amendment, the Council will still be projecting a surplus of over 400,000, and we're not even touching this year's surplus of over 1.5 million. It really does beg us belief. To some of the things we've said. Oh, by the way, I'm a chartered tax advisor by profession, so just so you know, there's a difference between tax and spend. Yeah, we're talking about not taking money off people here, not giving it away to them. And as for the people know better how to spend their own money, well, yeah, that's why we're saying let them spend it. Don't take it off them. Please support the amendment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bofford. I don't think there's anybody else. Councillor Bob Hogman, you'd like to finish the debate.
Thank you, Chairman. I have some empathy to Mr. Chairman. Councillor Green has his hand up. Speak before.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Green.
That's okay, you missed me. It's a point of clarification more than anything. Is it possible to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes so we can discuss it as a group? It's the first time we've heard about it. Because actually it's Conservative values to be cutting taxes and keeping more people's money in their own pockets. And there is actually a lot of benefit to what possibly Councillor Boffey has just said. However, I'm not comfortable with voting it on a whim. So I was wondered if we could adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes so Cabinet could talk about it collectively, because they've not been able to do so. Is that something which is, I can see the Chief Executive shaking his head, so that's not possible. So that's a shame, but we'll have to decide in the moment.
Yeah, I take your point, Councillor Greening, but no, so we will carry on with Councillor Hogman.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Green does have a point that we have policy advisory groups for the revision of policies. If our council reduction scheme is not fit for purpose and does not deliver, then the appropriate time to be reviewing that is at a Pdag. I think it's necessary for me to clarify some more about our council reduction scheme. Horsham's council tax reduction scheme currently provides financial support for the residents on low incomes and provides a mean-tested discount to their council tax payments. The scheme protects pensioners, lone parents with children, people with disabilities or caring responsibilities, and war widows. All working age people have to pay a maximum of 10% of their council tax, and it's 100% for those people in the bracket. So just to put that into context, what does that actually mean? That means that anyone in that category potentially pays zero council tax, and those also means tested pay up to 10%. So let's just run through some numbers. The £4.57 rise is 9 pence a week. So the council tax that I'm proposing, 2.9% is 9 pence a week. If you were in one of those low-income families, you would have to pay a penny a week extra. I'm not sure that's going to break the bank, but I do totally understand the thought process behind the Addendum's motion. I think we have a similar objective to be helping our residents. So I'm not being disingenuous to the motion, but I need to explain my thought processes around the motion. It's an oversimplification of a very complex issue. It isn't something that's just within my remit to wave my magic wand and resolve. We are a partnership. The council tax bill is made up of West Sussex County Council, the Fire Brigade, the police, the parishes, the precept, special charge, and Horsham District Council. We have to work in partnerships with those agencies to resolve the overall council tax figure. So that's why it was necessary for Council Chairman to talk to Marshall and get us to the situations where we are today. So let's come back to the numbers. 90% of people, there is a 90% reduction to anyone claiming council tax relief. There is a 100% reduction already to half of our applicants. I believe that the more people are coming off council tax reduction, the last figures I saw was it was down 10%. The local economy in Horsham is recovering. We have less and less claimants of that scheme. I'm not saying that it will go up next year, because obviously if there is a cost of living crisis as predicted, that may well increase and that may change the numbers. Pensioners are also in that category. So pensioners, disabled, mental health, carers, war widows, we are providing a huge level of support to council taxpayers. I don't know about you as councillors, I don't see a huge volume of letters in the West Sussex County Times, caseloads of residents emailing me saying, oh, I didn't get support from the council tax, council tax haven't been supporting of me. So I'm not sure we're solving the problem already there. We have an excellent council tax reduction scheme. Supporting our residents is the day job. It is something that our reps and benefits teams go on. I would like to extend my thanks to the officers and the officer team for the miraculous work that they do. But we have been successful in securing a continued relationship that we've had the last 2 years with West Sussex County Council. We have secured £150 a resident reduction on that bill. Now, our council tax share of that £150 is 8 to 11%. It is our share of the council tax bill. We read on our council tax leaflet, Horsham Council only take 8% of that. So for us to consider paying the whole lot, which was a suggestion by our colleagues, would cost us around somewhere between £400,000 and £600,000. My rough estimate would be £500,000. So that was not achievable. By working in partnership with West Sussex County Council, we have been able to achieve an outcome that benefits a huge number of our residents, over 6,000 residents, or certainly 3,000 extra residents. No, I'm quite the figure. Scrub that from the record. Everyone claiming council tax relief in a Band D and a Band B property will benefit. They'll pay no council tax. Louise Potter is right, and Martin Boffey is right. If you are in a Band C property and you are on one of these categories where you're just a low-income family or working family, you may have to pay £29 a year in council tax. So this is the figure we're talking about. For a Band D property, it does vary. There are different council taxes across our parishes. They go from Colgate up to Lower Beeding, so there is a range of reduction. But a Band D property, obviously, £1, they may have to pay £57. I've got to those facts. But it comes down to mathematics. It comes down to the fact that it's not our decision in total to amend the council tax reduction scheme. We could do it. If we were to do it, we'd be funding West Sussex County Council. We'd be giving West Sussex County Council that £59, that £29, we'd be taking it off Horsham Council's budget, and we'd be giving it to West Sussex. That is a grey area to me. That is a stepping over the line. We support the parishes with the precept. We understand that the police are not willing to come in with us, and actually we have voluntarily, as we did last year, offered to cover the parishes in the precept charge. So our 8% is near 12 or 13%. So we have an incredibly generous scheme. It's ahead of some councils. It is fit for purpose. But I think we have the same objective as the Lib Dems, to support our residents in need. I'm going to propose a slightly different amendment. So if I can propose an amendment to amendment, I'm not sure quite how I do that. Can I not do that? I'll do that afterwards.
Well, you really have to take the amendment that we've got here first.
Okay. So,
point of order, Mr. Chairman. I believe that if the proposer and the seconder of the amendment are willing to accept the variation, then it can be accepted. So I think we're probably willing to listen to what Councillor Hogman's got to say.
Thank you, Councillor Boffey.
Well, actually, I would prefer to deal with this amendment first, please. So it's an amendment to the addendum.
Sorry, I haven't quite finished it, Chairman, if that's okay.
You carry on.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So there are different ways of skinning a cat. I would propose that our scheme is fit for purpose. I regrettably would not be supporting the amendment. I believe that the scheme I've put forward is incredibly beneficial. However, I would propose, and we can either do this as a motion tonight, that we lobby our West Sussex County colleagues. We have 2 West Sussex County colleagues in the room. I would propose that we ask the leader, the chief exec, to lobby West Sussex County Council to review their scheme. If they are willing to support taxpayers in band C and D, I feel that there is enough money within our budget to cover our share of that. So I propose that we take a political stance as a council, and that we agree with your support, fellow councillors, that we ask the chief executive, the leader, possibly myself as deputy leader and cabinet member of finance, to write to West Sussex Council to see if they will further support us. I also propose, and I do absolutely empathise that we may have to do this as a separate amendment, but the comments I've wrote down here, to delegate to the Director of Corporate Resource in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Finance the ability to expand the scheme beyond £150 to working age claimants should there be headroom in a £120,000 budget, with the aim of helping to reduce the residual council tax for as many working age claimants as possible. And let me explain what I mean by that. I mean that our share of the £29 obviously would be 11%, £2.90. There's no reason why we can't do our share in a band D. That would be £6 per resident. I see those two as possibly being able to achieve within the £120,000 budget we've got. And I'll go one step further, that I will agree to review the council debt reduction scheme in June's budget. So that if it isn't fit for purpose, I will come back to council, we'll review the number of claimants, we'll review the amount of money we put in the budget, and if it's necessary, we can increase that. So obviously I heard the chairman said I can't quite put my amendment in yet, but that would 3 things I'm suggesting we lobby West Sussex County Council, we ask our leader, our chief executive, to sign a letter on your behalf as councillors in support of that motion. We agree to take the council tax reduction scheme back to the finance cabinet member in June to review it at the policy development group, and ultimately Councillor Greening, if there are amendments to the scheme, is absolutely right. We need to discuss them as a team. They are our policy development is something we do in conjunction with our councillors and with our officers. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm there.
Thank you, Councillor. I like the thought of amendments on amendments on amendments. However, I'm going to take the initial amendment on the addendum, and the recommendation that you put to the council as in the addendum is the one that I'm taking as a substantive addendum, and then we will have the amendment that has been proposed by Councillor Potter, and we will vote on that, and then afterwards you can put another amendment if you wish to. But I'm going to clear this amendment first. So
sorry, Mr. Chairman, point of order. I thought we had to take the amendment as suggested first before we come back to the substantive.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that your initial recommendation to council, which was in your addendum, is the substantive addendum, okay? And that the amendment that has been put by Councillor Potter, seconded by Councillor Boffey, is the amendment that you will vote on now. So can I ask, I hope you're clear about that.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, okay. So can I ask, first of all, on the amendment, Can I have a show of hands of those who are in support of the amendment? Sorry?
Is it a roll call?
Are you asking for a recorded vote?
Yes.
In that case, it's recorded vote. But if two people are asking me for a recorded vote, then it will be a recorded vote. Not a problem.
So the amendments to it is on the recommendation number 1 on the addendum is to amend £150 to 210, and I think it's right to add at the bottom the brackets within the confines of the overall budget of the scheme, and then on the recommendations 2 and 3 to amend the figure £120,000 into the figure of £300,000. Right, so on that one, so Councillor Allen, Councillor Baldwin, Councillor Bevis, Councillor Blackall, Councillor Hockney, Councillor Bradnam, against, Councillor Brown, against, Councillor Karen Burgess, against, Councillor Peter Burgess,
Against.
Councillor Clark,
Against. For.
Councillor Daw,
Against.
Councillor Donnelly,
Against.
Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Greening. He's gone, okay, he's not in the room. Councillor Hogben,
Against.
Councillor Jupp,
Against.
Councillor Kitchen,
Against.
Councillor Lambert,
Against.
Councillor Landieu,
Against.
Councillor Lindsay,
Against.
Councillor Milne,
For.
Councillor Minto,
For.
Councillor Mitchell,
Against.
Councillor Morgan,
Against.
Councillor Noel,
Against.
Councillor Olsen,
For.
Councillor Platt,
For.
Councillor Potter, 4, Councillor Potts,
Against.
Councillor Raby,
For.
Councillor Ritchie,
Against.
Councillor Rowbottom,
Against.
Councillor Saheed,
Against.
Councillor Skip,
Abstain.
Councillor Stannard, Councillor van der Kloot,
Against.
Councillor Vickers,
Against.
Councillor Waters, Councillor Wright,
Against.
Councillor Utan.
Against.
So that's 11 for, 27 against and 1 abstention. So the amendment was lost.
So, as a result of the vote, the substantive motion is the one that we will have to agree to or vote on in the final vote of the recommendation to Council of the whole budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to submit one minor amendment based on the proceedings this evening.
I'll come to that. Thank you. But obviously, Councillor Hogben wishes to say a few more words, so I'm going to allow him to say what he continued to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the spirit of the Lib Dems motion, obviously it is our objective to help as many families as possible. We don't want to be seen I'm suggesting we add a fourth motion onto my addendum. It is to delegate to the Director of Corporate Resource, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Finance, the ability to expand the scheme beyond £150 to working age claimants should there be headroom in the £120,000 budget, with the aim of helping to reduce the residual council tax for as many working age claimants as possible. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, it's an amendment, isn't it? So we have a second. There is an amendment, therefore. Did you all hear that? Delegate to the Director of Corporate Resources, in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Finance, the ability to expand the scheme beyond £150 to working age claimants should there be headroom in the 120,000 budget, with the aim of helping to reduce the residual council tax bill for as many working age claimants on the CTS as possible. Now that is an amendment which has been put forward by the Cabinet member, therefore I will need a seconder. Councillor Beavis, thank you very much. And therefore you can speak now or later if you so wish. But I'm now going to open this for further comments.
Very briefly, just to thank Councillor Hobden for coming up with that form of words. I think it's an excellent compromise, and hope that we'll be able to work with it.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to? Yes, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just ask for clarification on the eligibility of this scheme extension? When you say working people, what do you mean? What's the eligibility? We talked a lot about council tax bands, for example, this evening. So, who's eligible for the scheme?
This primarily, thank you, Councillor Brown. This primarily applies to working age claimants. There are a large number of the applicants that already receive 100% relief. Pensioners, war widows, people with disabilities, lone parents with children under 5, I believe it is. So not all of our claimants are affected, because many of our residents we're already helping with 100% relief, as I stated earlier. I think there was roughly 5,600 people on a caseload, of which over half already received the 100% discount. So we're not targeting everyone with this particular relief. We're targeting the working age parents on low incomes. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wished to make a comment? No. So the amendment that is being proposed is a recommendation that Council delegate to the Director of Corporate Resources, in consultation with a Cabinet member for Finance, the ability to expand the scheme beyond the £150 to working age claimants, should there be headroom in the budget, £120,000 budget, with the aim of helping to reduce the residual council tax bill for as many working age claimants on CTS as possible. And are you saying that you wish to substitute that for number 3 or add it as number 4?
I believe it's just an additional thing.
Okay. So before. Does anyone wish to take a recorded vote on that, or are you happy to vote on it? No, thank you. Anyone disagree with what has been proposed? Do you all support what has been proposed? Thank you very much. So that will be added to the addendum and will be number 4. Which still, thank you very much, Councillor Hobden. Is that all right? Yes, that's fine with that. Which brings us back to the recommendation before you, along with the 4 that we have just debated. Those are the 10 that are written on pages 21 to 22. Is there anybody who wishes to talk or speak to those particular 10 items? Councillor Jupp.
Thank you, Chairman. If you'll pardon me, I'd just like to refer to Appendix D, which is the capital budget. As my colleagues will know, I've represented Billingshurst for 7 years now, in conjunction with Councillor Rowbottom and Councillor Brown and Councillor Lindsay at different times. I was particularly pleased to see in the capital budget in Appendix D the provision for the new works at Billingshurst Library Car Park, which will allow a modest but important increase in the number of car parking spaces there, which I know that my local residents will very much appreciate. This has been delayed for one or other reasons over the years, but I'm particularly pleased, and I congratulate the Cabinet member for including it in the capital budget for the forthcoming year. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jupp. Are there any other members wishing to speak? Councillor Lander, I think you are on to speak at the end of this. Stick their hands up. Hang on. Councillor Boffey.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, there's a large package of documents there. There's a few items I wanted to comment on. Some of these we may have covered a little, touched on earlier, but climate change. So, there's indications in this budget that we're heading in the right direction, but £1 million this year, it sounds like a lot, but it's still a fairly modest start. And even the Deputy Leader at Cabinet, they said that, Council could be suggested was kicking the can down the road. We only have 7 years left to hit net zero, so there's a hell of a lot of work to do. So we really do need to crack on. Looking at the capital programme itself, the budgets to scope out the future investment in both the capital and the Southwards Country Park are welcomed by Liberal Democrat members. These are important community assets with huge potential, and the Council needs to put its shoulder to the wheel to make sure this potential is realised, so we support this. Regarding the medium-term financial strategy, it was interesting to see in there that we're modelling a 2% council tax rise every year again. It's interesting that this reappeared. I believe that was always the assumption in previous years until last year it mysteriously disappeared and we were told it would be wrong to bind the hands of future councils, which obviously is nonsense. So I'm quite pleased to see that we're returning to the status quo ante of sensible, prudent budgeting. In the capital strategy, treasury and investment strategy, I won't dwell on it too much, but because it's quite a dry area, but I still have concerns that we are not achieving as large a return on our significant cash holdings and investments as we could do, while still not taking on excessive risks. As we move into a higher inflationary environment, this is even more important. We cannot afford to have the Council's assets and spending power eroded in real terms, and I will be continuing to scrutinise this both through the Audit Committee and the Finance Pdag in the year ahead. Of course, a related risk factor when it comes to inflation is interest rates. Currently, the Council is debt-free, and this is undoubtedly a good thing. However, what we can also see is that there is a gap between our total reserves of £26 million and the £35 million estimated cost of hitting net zero. As the Chairman of the Audit Committee has noted in the past, part of this deficit will be met by the annual MRP. However, this is unlikely to be enough, and at some point the Council will need to consider borrowing in order to meet the challenge, especially when the total cost could end up being well more than £35 million. As Councillor Potter noted earlier, we're seeing early signs that more than a decade of historic lower interest rates is coming to an end. If it turns out that the Council does need to take on debt in the coming years to meet its objectives, a careful balance and forward planning will be required to ensure that we neither incur interest costs unnecessarily by going early, nor do we miss the boat on cheap debt by waiting until interest rates have risen significantly. It's a careful balancing act. This is why it's so important that work continues at pace to scope out the work required on the capital programmes, and firm commitments are made to get the work done. And I look forward to working with Councillor Noel in particular on some of those projects in my other portfolio of leisure and culture. Shadow portfolio, that is. Sorry, getting ahead of myself there. I must admit, since we now, when it looks to some of the initiatives, options that are put forward for how we meet the savings that we might need to make in the future, in the MTFS it says, we can either look at increasing return on investment, or we can dispose of assets or cut services. I'd like to see a little bit more ambition in there, because when it talks about increasing return on investment, it's invariably by getting rid of our assets and services and doing something else with them. So if we could, take advantage of Councillor Hogman's entrepreneurial experience and try and look at some other options for how we might meet that gap, that would be really good.
Councillor Boffey, if I could just say that you had 5 minutes, so can you start to wind up?
Will do.
Please.
All in all, this is a pretty steady-as-she-goes budget. It hints at the correct direction of travel, but needs an injection of urgency, boldness and commitment to action to get us where we need to be. So, however, we've seen got to a difficult point this evening with the additional discretionary discount, so I was hoping that we could get a bit more agreement than where we are, and whilst we've got the commitment to talk in the future. Not sure, so I'm still going to find it difficult to support the package overall. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else? Oh, yes, Roger, Councillor. No.
I would just like to note my appreciation of Councillor Boffey's comments on the assets that we currently hold in Horsham District, particularly the Capitol and Museum and the other assets that leisure and culture are involved with. And I thank him very much indeed for that support, and I hope that that support is echoed across the whole of the Lib Dem party, as well as our party, and as well as, obviously. However, I would note that Councillor Boffey also was urging prudence and caution in spending council money about 20 minutes after he urged us to spend more money in the council tax saga. So it has to be treated carefully, and that's all I'm saying. We have to look very carefully at what we spend money on in the future, because, as I said earlier, we are in a very good position at the moment, but we have to watch our finances and be careful what we're doing. In the meantime, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Boffey, for your support.
Councillor Donnelly.
It was said we must show urgency and boldness. Well, that's always a guarantee for chaos. We have this inflation factor creeping up on us now, which is making the work of the Cabinet more and more difficult. It's probably a real inflation rate of about 7 to 8%. The government, as you know, conned everybody by switching from RPI to CPI as the mechanism to increase pensions and staff salaries, etc., etc. Also, we must not forget there is a cap on the amount we can increase council tax by. We have the lowest council tax in West Sussex, one of the lowest in the country, and I know the Cabinet's intention is to keep that virtually forever if we can. Nevertheless, we should have our own flexibility to increase it by a bit. If we went up by 3.5%, bearing in mind that real inflation is about 8%, it's not making too much of an impact on something that's eating away at everything. Also, the opposition member talked about return on assets. Well, the finance director and the cabinet member for finance are very, very restricted in what surplus monies can be invested in, for a very, very good reason. To ensure that we don't lose the money in speculative ventures. So there's very little room for manoeuvre there. Of course, there are our fixed assets, which is an aspect we've talked about on many occasions, and we have three big non-performing assets. We all know what they are: the Rookwood, the drill hall, and the running track. And we do have a duty to get a good return on our assets. It's inscribed in the various documents all over the place. So yes, if we could turn those into what they should be, valuable assets and useful assets and performing assets, that would make take a big step forward. However, most people here don't want to touch Rookwood. We all know what happened last time it came up. It's a non-performing asset, it is a bad debt, and it's a long outstanding bad debt. And so it goes on. The drill hall, I do hope, works out well. I think the Cabinet have put together a good plan with the Legion. But nevertheless, a 100-year-old building, and we all know about old buildings and what happens with them eventually. They can be a huge cost problem. But to criticise the Cabinet for not showing urgency and boldness, particularly in return on assets, I'm afraid is missing the constraints that are placed on the Cabinet in dealing with these matters. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Thank you, Chair. The issue of climate change is coming up a lot, so I think it's important that we get on the record that whilst we can quibble about whether or not we declared a climate emergency, we are in one. And that is why it is one of our top priorities, and our target is net zero by 2030. And I'd like to remind everyone that we've already made incredible progress. If you've listened to any of the briefings by our environmental officers, you would have heard of all of the wonderful things the Council has already done. I've mentioned already, but I'll mention it again. Later this spring, we will be publishing our 3-year strategy and what we're doing for the next 3 years. And the reason why we're not rushing it is because there are substantial costs involved in it. You've mentioned them, 35 million. And that number ranges up to 55 million if you read some of Director of Corporate Resources briefings. But those include elements of entire refurbishments. For example, there's £2 million in there for the capital. That's not all for carbon reduction. There are other benefits in there as well. So we shouldn't be spooked by the cost of climate change. There are other benefits too, including cost savings as well. I will also add that whilst the Liberal Democrat group has been very noisy about climate change, I've only received one email from them about being involved in my Pdag, whereas I received many from my own side of the bench. I'd also like to remind everyone that the £1 million in the budget this year is going on £300,000 for electric vehicles, £205,000 for LED lighting at the Capitol, which has a 7-year payback and means we won't have to hire in any additional equipment during shows. £150,000 for making 3 homes a year net zero in Councillor Utan's portfolio. £100,000 for electrical vehicle infrastructure. That means we can roll out quicker and more effectively electrical vehicles at the hop or steppo. £35,000 for Park Barn new windows and management system to make that facility part of the journey to net zero. It's not the final thing we'll have to do there, but it's the little bit we need to do now to get us on the way, and it's effective spend. Likewise, as well in my own ward, £30,000 for LED lighting in the Storrington Library car park, as well as in Stenning Newman's Gardens and in some of our rural car parks. Further investment that Councillor Jupp has mentioned in our rural communities. £30,000 for Horsham Town Centre cycling study, and then also, last but not least, £20,000 on granary upgrade windows. And then also we're investing in our ability to combat climate change by doubling the size of an environmental team, with a new officer coming in to look at specifically at how we encourage everyone to make the right decisions. You will also notice as well in our new procurement system we have the ability to measure and talk about climate change and its impact as we deliberate on contracts. And just finally, the reason why we can't do everything now is that we don't have all of the information. There is more research that needs to be done. And over the next 3 years, we'll be doing some elements of decarbonisation, but we'll also be doing research into what is the best way to tackle these problems. So I would, although we're talking about the budget this evening, it's obviously a significant spend, but it is one of our top priorities, and I can reassure everyone in this room that we are spending money wisely, we're thinking about it, and we're making decisions in good time, in good order, to meet that target of net zero by 2030.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Burgess.
A question. I'm just going
Can I remind councillors at this point that we do stand when we're speaking, so I know it's been a long session, but could I ask people to stand?
At my age.
I'm sorry, Peter, I understand.
It's a quick question. I've been going through all these papers, and it talks about in number 2, sorry, we're going over the page, but it refers to Appendix C, Appendix, we've heard somebody going on about Appendix F, etc., etc. Where are these appendixes? Because I can't find them. I'm sorry?
In the Cabinet Papers.
Cabinet Papers.
Yeah. Sorry?
Yes, in the Cabinet Papers, Councillor Burgess. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say they should be in here, but no. But I take your point. Anybody else has anything to say otherwise? Councillor Landernew, thank you for waiting so patiently.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think
sorry, Mr. Chairman. Is there any possibility I can reply to some of the questions that Councillor Boffey raised? Or is that possible or not?
Yes.
Well, not at this stage. You can speak at the end, so I'm going to let Councillor Landernew. Yes, come on ahead, Councillor.
Yes, to say, I think we've had a very good debate on this, and I'm grateful for the Cabinet members that have explained exactly what they're spending. obviously seconding Councillor Hogman's budget here. I think what we've been presented with is both a balanced, prudent and fair budget. Balanced, it maintains services, and we have still got the lowest council tax in the top quartile of the country. It also has an eye on the future, both fiscally and environmentally, as Councillor Wright has just protested. I think it's fair, because we have generous council tax relief funds, policies rather, and it's prudent because it recognises the potential deficits that we could be having in 23-24 and 24-25. If we were to spend, as our Liberal friends are talking about, we would end up possibly having to have a budget or budgeting for a deficit, which would mean that we would have to cut services. So I just wonder what services we would cut. We are building, and we need to build reserves to overcome these future years if there are deficits on the horizon. I think, as I said before, this is a balanced, prudent, fair budget, and I would urge everybody to vote for it.
Thank you. Councillor Hogman, if you'd like to make your final speech of reply.
Thanks, Chairman. I just wanted to come back as a right reply to some of Councillor Boffey's statements. Climate change, are we going fast enough? Our leader, who's not here this evening, has a catchphrase: "Be bold, not courageous." I think he possibly borrowed it from Councillor Dorr or someone else in his timeline. But never a truer statement can be made around the climate change. It is a marathon. You're absolutely right. It's going to cost us £30 to £50 million, and to some people in that room, that sounds like an unaffordable, unachievable figure. But to me, you break it down into sizable chunks. It's project management. It's over the next 7 years. We'll divide 30 million by 7 years. You start coming with a figure. So Councillor Boffey is right. We do need to start making inroads into that, and our finance Pdag is very knowledgeable. I think I have 2 ex-leaders who've looked after the finance portfolio, and 2 other cabinet members who've looked after the finance portfolio, and an accountant. So I look forward to working with them on how we are going to financially plan for that. But I don't find the task daunting. We had a £10 million capital budget this year. The costs that are in that financial budget are achievable. There is some resilience within the budget, but inflation is a risk. It's been mentioned this evening that we have a £700,000 surplus this year. Well, that £700,000 surplus this year is based on inflation as it was back in November, December. If inflation stays at 5%, we could lose £600,000. I've just spent £120,000 this evening supporting some of the more needy in our district. So actually, I think we are currently planning to deliver a balanced budget in my head. So there are significant risks. Kicking the can down the road, I should clarify what I mean by that. What I mean is it's prudent to delay some of our climate things. I think Councillor Wright is absolutely right. We've been fabulously successful. I think we finished our climate change, our current timeline 6 months ahead of schedule. And I've seen some draft papers for March's cabinet agenda. We have another ambitious plan ahead, but we are being bold, not courageous. We do need to learn from the issues around St Peter's Hall. It's difficult to go quick on too many of these things. We have I think it's a £4 million fleet replacement for trucks. It wouldn't be prudent at this stage to replace them all for electric vehicles. The cost of electric vehicles is very high. We are suspecting that they'll come down. And it is actually more efficient to use our existing fleet. So bold, not courageous. Councillor Donnelly mentioned, Councillor Boffey mentioned return on investment. We do have £38 million to make the overall budget, and I think what Councillor we have significant income streams from car parking, from property. Our property portfolio is 57 million. I always wonder how big the council is, how big is the chief executive's job, what size of the company they run. It's actually huge. We talk about a £12 million income and a £38 million company. So I believe, off the top of my head, we get a 6% return on investment on the 57 million for our property portfolio, and our leader has actually kept that as part of his portfolio. He is an entrepreneur. He's been a very successful businessman. I am supporting him with running the property portfolio because he doesn't have a Pdag. So anything that we do on property will come through the finance Pdag to be verified and supported. But I'm working personally with the leader on that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I've
Thank you very much, Councillor Hobb. So I'm now going to ask the Council to approve the recommendations 1 to 10 on pages 21 and 22 en bloc, and the additional recommendations as agreed in the addendum, and there are 4 of them which I hope you have noted. And I'm going to ask that this is done by means of a recorded vote, please.
Yeah. Could I just make a point of order, or I'm confused, sorry. We're looking at items 1, 2 and 3. Are they not on page 25?
Yes, I explained that on my notes they are one set of numbers, but some people have got them a page or 2 different, so I apologise for that.
Right, thank you.
So, recorded vote then for the recommendations and the amended addendum as described. Councillor Allen.
Against.
Councillor Baldwin.
For.
Councillor Bevis. Councillor Blackall. Councillor Boffey.
Against.
Councillor Bradnam. For. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Burgess. Karen Burgess.
For.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For. For.
Councillor Dorr.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Greening.
For.
Councillor Hogben.
For.
Councillor Jupp.
For.
Councillor Kitchens.
For.
Councillor Lambert.
For.
Councillor Landieu.
For.
Councillor Lindsay. Councillor Milne. Councillor Minto.
Against.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Morgan.
For.
Councillor Noel.
For.
Councillor Olsen.
Against.
Councillor Platt.
For.
Councillor Potter.
Against.
Councillor Potts.
For.
Councillor Raby.
Against.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Rowbottom.
For.
Councillor Councillor Saheed.
For.
Councillor Skip.
Abstain.
Councillor Stannard.
For.
Councillor Vanderkloot.
For.
Councillor Vickers.
For.
Councillor Walters.
Against.
Councillor Wright.
For.
And Councillor Utan.
For.
So that's.
I'd also like to vote, please.
Oh, beg your pardon. Did I miss your name out? I do apologise. Councillor
against.
Fletcher. Thank you. So that's 29 in favour and 10 against and 1 abstention. So that the budget as amended is carried.
So by approving the recommendations, you've now approved the Council's budget for 22-23. Now, I do want to take a break, but I think probably if we can go through the rest of the financial budget, the financial paper, and then we'll break. So the Council now needs formally to approve the overall Council tax for 22-23, including the County Council, Police and Crime Commissioner and Parish Council precepts, as set out at recommendations 1 to 7 on my pages 25 to 34, but it may be on other people's pages 27 to 36. Is there a proposer for the resolution?
Yes, Chairman.
Yeah, and is there a seconder for the resolution?
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you. I don't. Well, I will ask if there's anybody who wishes to comment on the council tax proposals. If not, I ask the Council to approve recommendations 1 to 7 en bloc by means of a recorded vote.
Right. Councillor Allen.
Against.
Councillor Baldwin. Councillor Bevis. Councillor Blackhall. Councillor Boffey.
Against.
Councillor Bragnam. For. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Karen Burgess. For. Councillor Peter Burgess.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Croker.
For.
Councillor Daw.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
Against.
Councillor Greening.
For.
Councillor Hogben.
For.
Councillor Jupp.
For.
Councillor Kitchen.
For.
Councillor Lambert. For. Councillor Landew.
For.
Councillor Lindsay.
For.
Councillor Milne.
Against.
Councillor Minto.
Against.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Morgan.
For.
Councillor Noel.
For.
Councillor Olsen.
Against.
Councillor Platt.
For.
Councillor Potter.
Against.
Councillor Potts.
For.
Councillor Raby.
Against. For.
Councillor Rowbottom.
For.
Councillor Saheed.
For.
Councillor Skip.
Abstain.
Councillor Stannard.
For.
Councillor Vanderploot. For. Councillor Vickers. For. Councillor Waters.
Against.
Councillor Wright.
For.
Councillor Utan. For. That was 30 in favour, 10 against and 1 abstention. So the council tax, it's passed.
The motion is carried. Which brings us on to item 6, discretionary rate relief scheme for 22-23. I invite Councillor Tony Hogben, Cabinet Member for Finance, to present this item. I'll move the recommendations.
Thank you, Chairman. Horsham's discretionary rate relief scheme provides financial support to charitable organisations and not-for-profit organisations by reducing their non-domestic rate liability by up to 100%. For charitable organisations, this is by means of a top-up to their entitlement of 80% mandatory charity relief. For non-profit organisations, the discretionary relief of up to 100% may be applied to the rate account. Our current scheme provides a discretionary rate relief, normally to be limited to 50% of the amount payable and a maximum of £8,000 after any mandatory relief has been given. The proposed scheme is to remove the cap on the amount of relief that can be awarded so that all eligible organisations can receive up to 100% rate relief. This will provide clarity, transparency of the award and enable up to 40 existing relief recipients to receive additional financial support through reductions in the rates bill. The estimated cost of this additional award is £40,000 a year, for which HTC will pay 40%. Following some complaints from charities that our scheme is less favourable than others, Pdag considered this proposal in May and on the advice of my predecessor was put to public consultation and consulted the other preceptors affected. We received no comments either for or against this proposal. The recommendation is to refer the proposal of the new scheme to Council for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Hogben. Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Landew, thank you.
He's talking about, he's not talking about discretionary rate relief scheme. So when we've done the discretionary rate relief scheme, we'll have to go back to doing the council tax reduction scheme. He's been talking about the discretionary. So you're on page 5. Is it? Yes.
Yeah, go back. Yeah. So, Councillor Landew, you will be speaking about the discretionary rate relief scheme. You're seconding that one, because that's what we're talking about tonight.
Yes, Chairman.
Do you want to speak now or after the debate?
After the debate.
In that case, does anyone else wish to speak on this? Well, it doesn't appear to be that anyone wants to speak. Councillor Landew, would you like to say something?
Only that we have operated this for some years now, and I think, particularly in this day and age where charities are suffering, that is something we should continue.
Is everybody happy with what has been discussed by Councillor Hogben? Thank you very much. Which takes us back to the council tax reduction scheme, and I invite Councillor Tony Hogben to present this item and move the recommendations.
Thank you, Chairman. I believe earlier in the evening I've already explained in quite some detail the details of our council rate reduction scheme, so I won't repeat myself in any further unless there's any questions. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Is there a seconder? Yes. Councillor Lander, you? Yes.
Myself again, yes, Chairman.
Okay. Does anyone wish to say anything about the council tax reduction scheme? If not, can I take it that there are there's nobody against that scheme and everyone is happy with it? Thank you very much indeed. Which I think brings us to the end of the financial discussion, and I'm going to suggest, it's nearly 8 o'clock, that we actually take a 10-15 minute break and have something to eat and something to drink should you require it, and a comfort break, and we'll reconvene at
It's just going to give it to and cost them another £10,000 in the local. Frances has gone, hasn't she? Alan Britton's gone.
Yeah, well,
Is it the motion brought up? My response is brought up. It is Stuart Richard.
Was it?
8:10. We have one more item from the Cabinet, which is Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking Statement. And I'll invite Councillor Liz Kitchen, Cabinet Member for Community Matters, to present this item and move the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I hope and think this will be non-controversial. It has to come through here. We all know this ghastly trade has been going on for years and years and years, and so thank goodness people are doing something about it now. And this council is once again slightly ahead of the game, because there's a feeling that it will become a statutory requirement within the next 12 months. The approval of this statement shows a commitment of Horsham District Council to facilitate modern-day slavery in the community and its supply chains. It also supports the principles set out in the Sustainable Procurement Charter, which is used within the procurement process. This has been through Cabinet, and I'm now asking the Council to support the resolutions A and B. I will read them out, Chairman, if you want me to, but they are written in the agenda. Is that all right?
Thank you very much, Councillor Kitchen. Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Pellegrini, do you want to speak now or later?
Later, please.
So I'll open the debate for those who wish to comment on this item. In that case, I don't see any hands raised, so in that case, Councillor Green.
You don't need a long speech from me because it's been a long enough evening, so I'll just quote William Wilberforce, who said, having heard all of this and read all of this, you may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say that you did not know. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. Very apt. So all those in favour of approving the recommendation of the agenda, 23 of the agenda, please show. Any against? The motion is carried. Thank you very much, Councillor Kitchen. On page 35 and some pages 37, recommendations from committees. Audit Committee, Capital Strategy 22-23, incorporating investment and treasury management strategy. I invite Councillor Stuart Ritchie, Chairman of the Audit Committee, to present this item and move the recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman. Each year, this council approves this strategy for the very obvious reasons that we hold a large number of assets and have a very large cash flow. The papers set out quite clearly what the recommendations are, and I don't intend repeating them. The Audit Committee did consider the recommended changes, which principally is to do with the limits on pooled funds and property funds, where instead of having individual limits, we now have an aggregate limit of 30 million. And I think that's only fair and proper given the assets we hold, both on a long-term basis, but sometimes on a short-term basis. So I propose the recommendations as set out. Approval by Council.
Thank you very much. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Blackall, you may speak whenever. Okay. I'll open it out for debate. Does anyone have any comments about this? Anyone would like to speak on it? No, it looks as though it's you, Councillor Blackall.
And it's very it's something that that been through the audit committee. We've all approved it, and is another tribute to the work of Jane and her team in the finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Thank you very much. The motion is carried. Thank you very much to the audit committee for the work. Page 9, item 9, pages 37 to 43, appointment of Chief Executive and Head of Paid Service. Before I ask Councillor Tony Hogwood to present this item, I remind members if they wish to debate the recommendations, they'll have to exclude the press and public for that discussion. So I will now invite Councillor Hogwood, Deputy Leader and Member of the Employment Committee, to present this item and move the recommendations.
Thank you, Chairman. Appointment of the Permanent Chief Executive and Head of Paid Service, Returning Officer and Electoral Registration Officer. I'm introducing the next report to seek approval to appoint the appointment of Chief Executive in statutory positions that are linked with the role, Head of Paid Service, Returning Officer and Electoral Registration Officer. The Employment Committee met on several occasions, concluding 2 weeks ago, and selected Jane Eaton, our current Director of Corporate Resources, to be recommended for appointment to full council. A summary of Jane's career history is in Appendix 2 of the report. Many of you were given feedback on the presentations of the last 3 candidates in line and give your feedback to the committee. The majority of your feedback was that Jane was the most favourable. It is actually a credit to all 3 of our directors that they were originally made a long list, and Councillor Director Adam Chalmers also made the final 2 to his credit. In a bit more detail, following Glenn's resignation, we appointed Solace. Solace is the Society of Local Authorities Chief Executives, a leading member of network and local government, also offering commercial services to the appointment of Chief Executive recruitment. To support us in the recruitment to find our next CEO, candidates went through an assessment of interviews and tests, with the final 3 candidates being interviewed by the Employment Committee. The committee has considered the results of the interview scores, the feedback of members, the feedback of heads of service, presentations, and unanimously decided to elect Jane Eaton. I therefore recommend you agree the appointment of Jane Eaton as the Council's Chief Executive Officer of Horsham District Council, and the designation of Jane Eaton as Head of Paid Service as Returning Officer and the Electoral Registration Officer for Horsham District Council, with effect from the 16th of April 2022.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hogwood. Is there a seconder for the motion?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Does anyone wish to have a debate or a discussion about this? In that case, all those in favour of recommendations 1 to 4 on page 37 or 39 of the report, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. The motion is carried, and Jane, you are elected. I won't ask you whether you wish to say anything now. Thank you very much for that. Item 10 on page 47 to 50 or 45 to 48, depending on which page you've got, appointment of an external auditor panel. And I invite Councillor Stuart Ritchie, Chairman of the Audit Committee, to present the report of the Director of Corporate Resources and move the recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman. This is really a follow-on from a subject I spoke to at probably some length in our December meeting. Having resolved not to use the PSAA auditor appointments process, we moved to making an independent appointment of external auditor. That requires us to have a panel, and hence why you have agenda item 10 amongst your papers with recommendations to appoint Michael Chin and Alan Peach to be members of this panel alongside myself. Myself being proposed, well, I'm chairman of the audit committee, but actually I'm also a registered auditor myself, and so I know a little bit about the subject, shall we say. What I think is quite interesting, and why I think the council made a very good decision, is if you go to, don't suppose anybody in this chamber has read the Local Government Finance System Overview and Challenges of the House of Commons Committee on Public Accounts. But at page 13, it draws reference to the Institute Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, a body which I happen to be a member of, noted that while the local audit market is in crisis, government's response to date has not recognised the urgency of the situation. It goes on to say, however, now only 9% of all local government body audits for 2021 were completed in time. Audited accounts to be published by the extended deadline of 30 September 2021. This authority was one of those 9%. To be frank, I think we only got in by luck, because I think some other audits fell away within the wide portfolio of local government audits. And the report goes on to say, do local authorities think this is impairing their financial position? And there are cases of some local authorities where they're up to 3 years in arrears in having their audit done. We understand within West Sussex, most local authorities haven't had their audit completed or signed off as we speak today. One of the main things I spoke to back in December was the timeliness of the audit, and I think having the ability to select an external audit firm who has that ability to provide a timely service as well as the required level of quality puts us very much ahead of the game compared to what the Public Accounts Committee have to say. We have since learned that PSAA are packaging up smaller amounts of audit work, but their smallest audit package is something like 1.5 million. And relatively large accounting firms will not be able to pitch for that amount of work, because it's just simply too many audits at once. And so this gives us the flexibility that, based on presentations we received from firms to become our external auditor, we can be agile between what I perceive as be a very strong point, which is timeliness, and also quality, and also price. We can do it very much on an individual basis that works well for this authority. But to do that, we need a panel, and we had interviews with 3 candidates who responded to the application process publicised by Jane, and of those 3, we think that there are 2 people who would be very, very good to help us. One is involved with Saxon Royalties, and doesn't quite go by this job title, but he's effectively their Director of Finance, and he himself took Saxon Royal through auditor reappointment in the last 12 months. And the other person we're putting forward is a former Section 151 officer, so somebody with the same experience of Jane, and somebody who will also understand the ways of working with external auditors. So if I may just leave myself aside, I think the other 2 certainly represent a very strong panel, and for that reason I bring these recommendations before Council for your approval.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ritchie. Is there a seconder for this proposal? Thank you, Councillor Blackall. I'm opening it out to other members for their comments concerning this issue. No other comments? Nope. Councillor Blackall, do you wish to say?
What I would like to say on this is that, as is customary, I think we are extremely fortunate to have Councillor Ritchie with his qualifications in this field, and that what they've come up with the panel seems to be eminently sensible, and I would recommend that the council approve this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Here, I endorse what you just said. Thank you very much, Councillor Ritchie, for the work we put in. So all those in favour of approving the recommendations, please show. Thank you very much. Any abstentions? Otherwise, motion is carried. Thank you. Which brings us on to item 11. Grant decisions arising from the COVID-19 emergency. And I call on the Chief Executive to present this item.
Thank you, Chairman. Having ridden off into the sunset once already this evening, I'm now returning like a bad penny to account for decisions I've made using emergency powers. In December and January, the government announced at short notice additional funding for additional restrictions, grants, and there was a very short and an ARF grant as well, and there was a very short timescale for implementation, and in fact we were going into Plan B measures at the time. So I faced the option of either using emergency powers grants to the Chief Executive to implement those schemes and get much needed funding quickly to businesses that sorely needed it, or waiting until this council meeting. So after discussion with the leader and the relevant portfolio holder, we agreed I would use my emergency powers to implement those schemes. So you are asked under recommendation 1 on page 49, or probably page 47, Peter, on your pack, to note that decision that I made. The second item recommendation is only last week, I believe, Delush or Deluc, or whatever, however you want to pronounce it, announced additional funding. As part of that funding, we got 150,000 as our share of the National Protect and Vaccinate grant. As that was only announced last week, there's time to bring that to council, so that's a decision you have to make as a council. I haven't used emergency powers for that one, but I've included it in this report, so we need to take a vote on that. But again, that will provide much needed funding. Doesn't impact the council's budget, it's a pass-through of money from government, so I'd urge you to approve that recommendation. I will, but I might defer to the new Chief Executive, who knows much more about my business.
Are there any questions? I'd just like it clear if there are. Yes, Councillor Minter.
Not necessarily a question, just some feedback. I know a lot of small business owners in the districts. Sorry, taking a leaf out of Peter's book. I know a lot of small business owners in the district, and made it my kind of duty to ask them how they were getting on throughout COVID and how well did the council perform, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. So I just think testament to the Chief Executive decision there and the officers. I think you've done an amazing job.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any other comments? The first recommendation on page 49 of the report is for noting, and all those in favour of approving the second recommendation, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? The motion is therefore carried. Thank you very much for your hard work on the COVID-19 and the emergencies. Much appreciated, and as we've heard from Councillor Minto, noted amongst the people in the community, so thank you. Item 12, changes to Cabinet Committee and Pdag memberships from January 2022. I invite Sharon Evans, Head of Legal and Democratic Services and Monitoring Officer, to present this item.
So on the 3rd of December of last year, Councillor Jonathan Chown was elected the new leader of the council. He announced changes to cabinet portfolios and appointed and confirmed his cabinet members on the 6th of December. The cabinet reshuffle has led to a number of changes to the cabinet portfolio, and I will take the opportunity just to explain what those are. We now have property and the local economy, finance and car parking, community matters, housing and public protection, environment and rural affairs, recycling and waste, leisure and culture, planning, development and Horsham town. The current committee and policy development advisory group memberships were therefore out of date and no longer aligned to the requirements set out within our constitution, and therefore we needed to do some updating. The new cabinet appointments also mean that some committee memberships were no longer adhering to that constitution. For example, cabinet members cannot sit on overview and scrutiny, and only one cabinet member can sit on the governance committee. In addition to these changes, there have been 3 by-elections since the group nominations that took place in May of last year. All of these changes were made in accordance of Article 8 of the Constitution, and the recommendations are found on pages 73 to 84. I should say that the appendix 1 and 2, changes to the cabinet portfolio functions and responsibility, committee and the Pdag memberships set out in the appendix 1 and appendix 2, found on pages 73 to 82, which would be 75 and 84, possibly for Peter. They are all listed in detail there. And then we have to also, this is for Council to note, that the monitoring officer will make the required changes in the Constitution in accordance with 13.3b3, and it will reflect the leaders' announced appointments. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. The recommendations are for noting. So, that's it. Peter, Councillor Burgess, sorry.
Just a small point. On my page 79, I don't know what the hell it is that you've got, under licensing, regretfully, Councillor Jim Sass is no longer here, and he's the chairman. I won't comment on that. You know my views very strongly, but there will be a need for a new person, and at the first meeting we'll have to elect a new chairman, so he needs to be taken out of that. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Thank you very much, Sharon, for that. Calendar of meetings, page 30, item 13. I invite Glenn Chip to present this item.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm in danger of making more comebacks than Frank Sinatra at this point. But, I'm not going to... Very droll, Peter, very droll. I'm not going to say much about this item. I'd like to say something about the last item. I feel a bit of a fraud taking credit for the work done by the team at Northampton and managed by Jane for the distribution of the grants. It's our revenues and benefits team that did that, and I agree with you, they did a fantastic job. But the calendar of meetings is as presented. We've followed the format of previous meetings. In fact, you've all been consulted on them, so I hope Council will approve that calendar because you've had opportunity to make your comments now.
Thank you very much. So I move that the recommendation for the calendar of meetings on page 81 or 83 be approved. Is there any comments? Are you all agree? Please show of hands, thank you. That's fine. Reports of representatives. Does any member who represents the council on an outside body wish to make a report? No. And no sub-motion. Item 15. We have received 2 notices of motion in accordance with Rule 4A26 of the Constitution. And the time allowed for this item in total is 30 minutes. So we will consider these notices of motion in the order they were received. I invite Councillor Bob Platt to present his motion. It is a very long motion, as you will, and contains a lot of information which needs consideration. I wasn't going to ask him to read it because I think that could take a long time, Bob, on that one. But it is very, very important. So I am going to ask if there is a seconder to your motion, which is Mike Croker. Do you want to speak now, Mike, or later?
Speak later, thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to say that we will debate the motion, and when the debate is finished, Councillor Platt, as the mover of the motion, may then speak for a second time. Does any member wish to speak on the motion?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Platt. I welcome such a substantial motion. Owing to the complexity and depth of the subject matter and the limited time available at this meeting, it is felt that this should be referred to the relevant policy advisory development groups to be discussed and considered fully. I therefore recommend this in accordance with 4A.28F of the Council's Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have a seconder? Thank you very much, Councillor Hogben. In the Constitution, it does say that an amendment can be tabled and there will be no debate. So I would expect that the offer that you've made to look at this Pdag is the right, correct one. Councillor Platt, do you wish to say anything?
Yes, just Chair, thank you. Yes, I appreciate this is to have just 15 minutes at the end of this very long meeting to discuss this issue is too limited, and I think the suggestion to take it to a Pdag would be more reasonable.
Thank you very much for that. It's appreciated, and I guess there will be further discussion in Council about this as a result of what happens with Pdag. So thank you. The second motion is presented by Councillor Paul Clark, and Councillor Clark will present his motion.
Thank you, Chairman. May I ask a question as a point of order? I have the notice of motion here. Do I speak later, or do I speak after having enunciated what the notice of motion is?
Yep, you can speak. You can speak now or later.
Thank you. I propose the following notice of motion because Highways England, or National Highways, have posted another consultation to do with the Arundel A27 bypass. This consultation ends in early March, hence needing me to bring it to Council at this meeting, as there is no meeting before the consultation closes. The motion as drafted reads: this Council supports the proposed Arundel bypass scheme featured in the current Highways England consultation and expresses the hope that all major stakeholders will support the proposal. Further, this Council, in the interest of our residents and residents throughout West Sussex, hopes that Highways England will be able to move quickly ahead on early implementation of its proposal, and that Highways England will also be able to address as soon as possible the other projects needed to remove the current bottlenecks to free the flow of traffic on the A27. That's the end of the motion as drafted. If I may, I'll continue.
Yes, I.
Why this motion? It's simple. At the previous consultation on the A27 bypass, the Council supported the principle of the bypass. Council believed it was of huge interest and importance to us because of the economic benefits and growth created by this project. Also, importantly, would be the improvement to the quality of life of a sizable proportion of our southern residents. This is our opportunity to put a marker down on behalf of our electorate as Highways or West Sussex County Council purview. National Highways, or Highways England, are proposing option 5BV1, the grey option as they call it, if I've read it correctly, which essentially, for the most part, is the same as or similar to the magenta option, which was the option in the initial consultation that we supported with some tweaks. Why is it important for us to further support this bypass on the A27, you may ask? Well, 3 main points. 1. If we look very simply, the bypass around Arundel will improve the life of quality of many of our villages and settlements in the south of the district. Because of bottlenecks and traffic on the A27 at peak times, this is for the ones who don't know the geography of the south, many drivers prefer to divert away from the A27. They take the Stenning, Washington, Storrington, Amberley route, following essentially the A283 and then the B2139 to avoid the A27 and Arundel. I remind councillors that Storrington has a major air quality issues and is an AQQMA, which translates as an air quality management area. Levels mainly of NOx are very high in Storrington as they are at Calthorpe. This also happens in my patch at Swan Corner in Pulborough. Storrington has a right to clean air, and the number 1 item on the list to make this happen is actually this bypass. A bypass would also affect other communities, such as mine in Pulborough and in my ward, Colwaltham and Watersfield, because traffic avoids Arundel bottlenecks by coming off the A25 via the A29 to rejoin the A27 at Fontwell, west of Arundel. And we also see trucks coming off the A24 and rejoining the A29 using the B2133. This will help reduce the amount of 40-ton HGVs on the Pulborough A29 GO tracks, to quote Councillor Donnelly. Point 2, the economic benefits. Debottlenecking the road will allow a smoother flow of HGV traffic and commuter and leisure traffic. West Sussex has poor east-west links, these namely being the A27 and the A272. The A27 is not great due to a number of bottlenecks, including this one. The A272 is good for motorbikers, but not for HGV drivers. Better communications, improved traffic flows on the A27 will lead to less pollution from idling traffic and attract HGVs away from the rat runs and the poor road links in the rest of the south of the district. The motion as drafted underlines the need to resolve further A27 problems. The third point for this is that local traffic around Arundel and other communities will be reduced by the traffic moving away from those roads, which should lead to more trips for local people on foot and by bicycle. This happens because confidence will grow because of lower car and more especially HGV trips on those local roads. The scheme provides opportunities for West Sussex County Council to work with Highways England to improve cycle and footways as well as bridleways along the proposed A27 route. Also, this will encourage the same in villages further afield, such as Pulborough and Storrington. I don't envisage roller skating on the A29, but at least we might see some bicycles. These are some of the reasons why I think this council should support the proposed plans for the A27 bypass. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. Is there a seconder for this motion?
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Wright, thank you. Do you want to speak now or later?
At the end of the meeting.
So I'll open it up for discussion. Councillor Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Roads in UK, especially in the south, are appalling. Anybody who runs down the A303 sees consistent, unnecessary blocks. Here is a case where we have a good road, one of several going east-west into south, but if you drive along it, you suddenly reach a blank wall, which is where it should have gone on through and bypassed Arundel. We can talk about we're supposed to be greening up. We are supposed to be greening up. And though building a road is expensive, what it will do is, much as Councillor Clark has said, it will stop any pollution, make traffic easier to go, and support and keep clear a lot of our local roads and our villages. So we need to get on with it. I don't know when the A27 at Arundel was first built. I don't have that record, but it goes back a long time. Consistently arguments against it. If you go further along that road to what was going to be the new Chichester bypass, that was opposed so often Highways withdrew all money to it, and it's still a complete shambles. So let's get on with it, and let's move in the strongest possible way for Horsham District Council to support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Donnelly?
Well, Councillor Burgess has said a lot. I was going to say, I think somebody needs a big kick up the arse on this bloody project. Excuse my Irish. It's been, as has been suggested, I think 45 years ago did it first come up, 45, almost 50 years ago, it was sort of almost been agreed. Absolute nonsense that it has not progressed. Everybody wants it basically, and it's got nothing to do with green or non-green or whatever. The reality is, and every one of us here know, we all sit in the planning committees and we all know infrastructure has not been attended to over the past X years. And this is just a classical example of a total mess up, absolute total mess up. It's been needed for 45 years, and of course in that period as well, there are more houses and there are more cars. And whether we're going to drive petrol, diesel or electric, and I presume all electric in the next X years, there's still going to be cars on the road. And the population's going up by 150, 250,000 a year, blah, blah, blah. So the pressure is just never ending. But it really does annoy me that this thing has not been moved forward. And I think we should express in the strongest terms that they're just got to get a move on and build the damn thing. Thank you.
Councillor Olsen.
Thank you. I agree with my fellow councillor that everybody wants a solution, but I don't believe everybody wants this solution. I do not feel that this proposal is in the best interest of this council to support, or nor should we lend our support to it. There are still unresolved issues identified by local groups and major stakeholders, and many of which have already professed their lack of support for Highway England's selected grey route, not their selected grey route, but Highway England's selected solution. If this proposal goes ahead, it's the longest possible option that was on the table of road building. An enormous amount of carbon and emissions will be released on just the other side of the South Downs from our residents. A more polluting road with faster and louder traffic, negatively impacting the local communities, villages, and school catchments, which it slices in half, and will likely exceed budget estimates already. Just as we champion the wishes of our own local residents and their right to breathe clean air, I believe instead of supporting Highway England's preferred solution, we should be supporting the wishes of our southern neighbours and the alternative solutions put forward by the local campaign groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Black.
Thank you, Chair. The original proposal put forward by what is now Highways England involved a number of routes, several of which would have effectively destroyed the ancient natural woodland in Bidsted Woods. That provoked an uproar of protest, and they have rejected those routes and settled on the grey route in the hope that the relief that we would feel would dampen protest. But it doesn't solve the problem, and although I accept that there are congestion issues around Arundel, spending a massive £445 million on, as the Sussex Wildlife Trust described it, a nature-destroying, traffic-inducing, carbon-producing scheme to knock 9 minutes off the time taken to get from the traffic jams in Worthing to the traffic jams on the Chichester bypass is not a good solution. A much less invasive intervention has been proposed by a local group which would do much to reduce congestion at a fraction of the cost, but this seems not to have been considered. We also need to consider the harm this would do to the South Downs National Park. Horsham District Council has shown an enlightened attitude to environmental issues in this district. Why should we wish this monstrosity on another district? Councillor Croker and I represent wards in the south of the district, where residents frequently use or cross the already very busy A27 at Shoreham by Sea to access services, shops and leisure activities. And what will result from this is an increase in traffic generally along the A27. So the jams in Shoreham and Worthing will get worse. So we will be badly affected by the increased traffic that will result from this development. And I would ask members to vote against this.
I'm very much in favour of what Councillor Donnelly was saying, that we've got to get on with this. This was proposed originally and approved by the Conservative government under John Major back in 95, 96, and was then promptly scuppered by John Prescott in 97. On the promise that we would all be in trains and having buses going all over the place. Well, you know, that went the way of John Prescott, another lot of hot air and wind. And, you know, what we've got to realise is that the A27 needs upgrading to motorway standards. That includes the Chichester bypass, the Arundel bypass, Worthing, and so it goes right round and allows us to go. We have the ludicrous situation whereby we've got the wonderful development of Rolls-Royce. They've had record sales this year. One of the cars they built this year was for Beyonce and Jay-Z or whoever it was, and that one car was £20-odd million. That's the type of enterprise that is supported by this route. And you know, the economic benefit of this is amazing, and that we've got to get on with it. And I will go for a personal angle on this, that it does affect all the routes, including the road I live on, because they've got these smart navigation systems now, which direct, whenever there's a problem on the A27, A24, wherever it is, they direct it through the villages. And this morning I was in my front garden and heard this noise coming along. And what it was a low loader with a huge digger on the back of it. And the digger was so high that it was bashing in and knocking all the trees. This is a single carriageway lane with no footpaths. Any pedestrian would have been absolutely crushed. And this is what happens when we don't have adequate either east-west or north-south roads, and this is just one part of it which needs to be doing, and we need to get onto it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The route proposed in the current National Highways consultation is a different route to that most recently favoured by HDC. This is because the route previously supported was predicted to have the greatest impact in reducing rat running in this district. Nevertheless, it is recognised that a balance must be found, and the option selected by National Highways has a lower impact on a number of important environmental designations, including the South Downs National Park. I am therefore of the view that we provide a response that supports the principle of the proposed scheme and ask National Highways to minimise environmental harm both along the new route and in our district by including suitable mitigation measures. This could be in the form of support for alternative transport measures and air quality mitigation. I will ensure that our draft response is shared with the local members to seek their views prior to the submission of our reply. In advance of the final detail of this response being agreed, I propose that the motion be expanded slightly to read: This Council supports the principle of the proposed Arundel bypass scheme featured in the current National Highways consultation and expresses the hope that all major stakeholders will support the delivery of the new road. Furthermore, this Council, in the interests of our residents and residents throughout West Sussex, hopes that National Highways will be able to move quickly ahead on early implementation of the scheme in a manner which minimises any identified environmental harm. The Council also hopes that National Highways will also be able to address as soon as possible the other projects needed to remove the current bottlenecks to free the flow of traffic on the A27. Thank you.
Is that an amendment to the...
It expands it. It's not an amendment, it expands it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dorr.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid I didn't understand that at all. I'm not sure whether that was actually saying something for or against the bypass. I understand that, but to me it wasn't clear. I think the fundamental points here are we're looking at what was originally proposed as part of the Folkestone to Horsham route. This has been going on for years and years and years. We've got bits of it. Now, I understand the environmental concerns. I appreciate the comments, and particularly our Green members. But, you know, the original part of that was to build the Brighton bypass. If we hadn't got that, imagine the chaos that will be around Brighton. Now, what we've got here is just another part of that jigsaw. I also accept what Councillor Blackall has said, that we haven't dealt with Worthing. There have been 3 attempts at dealing with Worthing, and each time someone has decided that they can't go ahead, they bought houses and sold them all back twice. We've got to do this. It's got to move on. It will ultimately be to the benefit of everybody, because it'll actually help us in terms of commerce, because you don't know if you go on that A27 how fast it's going to get from A to B. Sometimes it can be half an hour, sometimes it can be 10 minutes. So I think it's very helpful from that point of view. I will be parochial here, and I will talk about my own ward. I've sat on as a committee to deal with air pollution in Storrington for, it must be 20 years now. We've come up with all sorts of solutions, all sorts of ways of trying to deal with the pollution problem in Storrington, which is the only other one in the district compared with that sits with Cowfold. We've looked at gating, which means you hold the traffic out from the village and you bring it in. We've looked at all sorts of other measures, which I won't bore you with. I also throw in that in 1933 and 1963 there were 2 proposals for a Storrington bypass, and each got scuppered by government. So that's the way these things work, and it's too late now. So to reduce that traffic, we've got to remove traffic that's going through on the A27. The calculation has been, and obviously one looks at models, that if we can build this Arundel bypass, it will reduce traffic in Storrington by about 35%, because that is fundamentally through traffic. A lot of it is HGVs. Now, in terms of air pollution or immediate air pollution, it has stabilised in Storrington. It's not going up. The reason it's not going up is because we've moved to more efficient engines over a period of time. Obviously, we're going to have electric vehicles, which also are far less polluting. So I think that the pollution problem itself will drop, and what we're dealing with here is the quantity of traffic. And I think it's absolutely vital, it's certainly vital for the people in my ward, that we get on with this and get it done. And only then will we deal with the problem that Storrington's lived with for 20 odd years. Thank you.
Yeah, on a point of order, having reconsidered advice on the monitoring officer, I'm not leaving, but I'm retiring from this debate. She can explain why afterwards. So I'm not leaving it. I'll accept that. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you very much. We all agree there are too many cars in Arundel causing congestion. We agree that there are too many cars on Horsham district roads causing congestion in our villages in the south. We all agree we need to do something about it. There are too many cars. You get what you build for. If you build for cars, you get cars. It's explicitly included in the business cases. This is a classic case of predict and provide, which, as Councillor Blackall says, dates back to the 1990s and way before that. We'd started to move beyond that, and a whole load of these schemes were binned. These zombie schemes are now being reheated. This scheme has a very poor cost-benefit analysis, even based on a cost of £1/3 of £1 billion. But as we've heard, it's not £1/3 of £1 billion, it's 450,000. Yeah, it just, the costs just go up. Pick a number, whatever number you like. But it won't have benefit for the money we're spending. This is a time of climate emergency. This is a time of increased working from home for COVID. This is yesterday's decision. We're stuck in the past if we build this bypass. It's going to have catastrophic environmental impacts on the local area. Not only that, this scheme fails on its own terms. If you build it, you just shunt the traffic jams along, as we've already had. Take off a few minutes now, but ultimately it's there to provide more cars and more traffic. And it's really strange to listen to a succession of councillors from the southern villages talking about their support for this scheme. It's a huge own goal, because the point of these schemes, the benefits in that cost-benefit case that's being made, are the benefits that are bringing more houses into the area. You're voting to build more houses in the south of the district. This is the thing that has ripped the ruling group apart. It's caused 2 changes of leaders, and now you're voting to build a road that will exacerbate the problem. There is an alternative. There is an alternative for a fraction of the cost. The Arundel alternative is road building. It's on a much more modest scale. What it does is it untangles the local traffic, of which there is an unusually large proportion in Arundel for a trunk road of this nature, from the through traffic. It will be a fraction of the cost. So that will free up the immediate problem that is causing such a huge amount of trouble for the local residents. Think what you could do with the money that's left over. Councillor Clark is talking about bicycles. It's usually me that's talking about bicycles. You don't get bicycles by rebuilding motorway standard dual carriageways. You get bicycles and people walking by building for people to ride bicycles and to walk. Massively cheaper infrastructure. Build for what you want. You want to get bicycles, build for bicycles. The Arundel alternative is a really serious proposal that could have the same benefits at a fraction of the cost, and I imagine a great deal quicker too. Rather than supporting building this huge dual carriageway, when we look at the problems we're seeing on our roads, in our villages, for which I have huge sympathy for the local members, maybe what you need to do is, instead of lobbying for massive carbon output in building a new road, huge amounts of additional car dependency, maybe the thing to do is to start lobbying and supporting road pricing. Thank you.
Very much, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Grogan.
Thank you, Chair. Members were pleased. I'm not going to read all this out. But I would like to quote our leader. I do not think anyone can now deny that the environment will be the dominating issue over the next 10 years as we try to hit carbon reduction targets and save our planet to safeguard our way of life. So, a view I support. I also support my colleague Councillor Platt and Councillor Fletcher. So here we are. It's time to stand up and be counted. Do we really support creation of a 5-mile high-speed dual carriageway, including a 1.5-kilometre viaduct across the Arun Valley? That's 3 times the length of the Shoreham viaduct on the A27. That would just save minutes of travel time between the traffic jams at Worthing and Chichester. Or should we, as Councillor Fletcher suggests, should we be encouraging national highways to drop their carbon-intensive trip-generating plans and use their creative skills to produce a local-scale, affordable, environmentally sensitive highway flow improvement along the lines of the Arundel alternative that could be delivered in far less time? I urge members to reject the motion before us. Thank you.
Councillor Croker. Don't see any other hands. We're getting short on time.
Sorry, Tony. Sorry.
Well, we have half an hour for these 2 motions, and we're well up on those. And I'm going to take Councillor Wright.
I promise to be brief, as I'm sure we're all keen to get on. I welcome the motion by Councillor Clark. As a member of the AQM myself, I know the issues of storage is my ward. I know this also affects Pulborough and Amberley equally as well. Councillor Dorr has campaigned on this issue for almost as long as I've been alive and knows the issue better than anyone else in this room, which is a backhanded compliment. I actually met with farmers today, as in my role as Cabinet Member for Rural Affairs, who are working with Highways England to build a biodiversity bank. So any of the damage done to woodland, hedgerows, rivers and trees will be offset against local farmland, and I wish to reassure the Green members that that is at the top of Highways England's priority. The investment in the Arundel bypass is part of the government's levelling up strategy that was released this week that commits to increasing local pride, sustainable living and greater connectivity. I'm saddened that the Northern Liberal members and the Greens believe that those in Storrington and Pulborough should continue to suffer with poor connectivity, a lack of local pride, and be unable to live sustainably due to poor air quality. So I recommend that all members here support this evening. It's the one thing that will fix air quality in my ward and many others. We're actually going to ask for a recorded vote because we believe this is such an important issue.
I'm going to ask Councillor Lambert whether her expansion is the same as an amendment.
It's not an amendment, no. All it does, it just strengthens the motion. It takes out it takes out proposed and puts in delivery. It's a couple of changes, that's all.
If it's not an amendment, we can't alter. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, point of order, Mr. Chairman, if changing the words in the motion, that's an amendment.
Yeah. Well, I would have said that, but Councillor Lambert insists it's not.
I'll withdraw it.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I don't think there's anybody else who wishes to speak, and the motion is before you as set out on the agenda.
Chair, point of order, we have asked for a recorded vote.
Yeah, I haven't finished.
And
just hang on. So, as far as I'm concerned, the debate is over in time terms and also in those who exercise their right to speak. We wish to have a recorded vote, and therefore we will take a recorded vote on this motion.
Who seconds?
Do you have two?
Sorry, can I just ask you seconding the recorded vote? You're seconding it. Oh, you're seconding. Sorry, thank you. The notice on motion on the A27 bypass. Matthew Allen.
Against.
Andrew Baldwin.
Abstain.
Anthony Bevis. Councillor Blackhall. Councillor Boffey.
Abstain.
Councillor Bradnam. Councillor Brown. Oh, sorry. Councillor Burgess. 4. Councillor Peter Burgess.
4.
Councillor Clark. 4. Councillor Croker.
Against.
Councillor Daw. 4. Councillor Donnelly.
4.
Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Greening has left the room. Councillor Hogben.
4.
Councillor Jupp. 4. Councillor Kitchen. 4. Councillor Lambert. 4. Councillor Landieu.
4.
Councillor Lindsay. 4. Councillor Councillor Milne.
Against.
Councillor Minto.
Abstain.
Councillor Mitchell.
4.
Councillor Morgan.
4.
Councillor Noel.
4.
Councillor Olsen.
Against.
Councillor Platt.
Against.
Councillor Potter.
Abstain.
Councillor Potts.
4.
Councillor Raby.
Abstain.
Councillor Ritchie.
4.
Councillor Rowbottom.
4.
4.
Abstain.
Councillor Stannard.
4.
Councillor van der Kloot. 4. Councillor Vickers.
4. Abstain.
Councillor Wright.
4.
Councillor Utan. 4. So that's 25 for, 6 against and 8 abstentions, so the motion is carried.
Very much. So, Councillor Clark, your motion is carried. 16 members' questions on notice under Rule 4A20B to 25. We have received a question on notice from Councillor Tony Beavis. Councillor Beavis, your question was intended for the Leader of the Council. but in your absence, the question we responded to by Councillor Roger Knoll, Cabinet Member for Leisure and Culture, and Councillor James Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies to members for being this late in the night that we're discussing this. 2023 marks the 50th anniversary of two significant events. First, the founding of Horsham District Council. Will consideration be made for appropriate recognition of this historic event across the district? And can the leader, or Councillor Knoll, ensure, if possible, that our honorary members, aldermen, are made part of this commemoration? And secondly, the 50th anniversary of Plant a Tree in 73, well before Councillor Wright's time. Will the leader ensure that HDC works with parishes and neighbourhood councils to record trees planted then and encourage the planting of new generation of trees in 2023?
I'm not sure which of you is going to answer this one, so...
Yeah, we're a bit confused ourselves, but we're not well organised. No, we know what we're doing. The first part is the founding of Horsham District Council, and you ask if consideration will be made of appropriate recognition of the historic event across the district. Yes, it will be. I understand actually that the 50th anniversary from I've been told is actually next year. Although it was formed in whenever it was, 1973. My maths is better than I thought. It was actually formed in 1974. So the 50th anniversary is actually next year. However, is that right?
No, it's the year after.
The year after. My maths isn't that good, sorry. So, it's a good job I'm not fine.
They were spending.
So, yes, whenever it falls, we will be celebrating this. The plant a tree, I am going to hand over very shortly to my colleague, but we don't have. I've asked our Parks and Countryside team, and we don't actually have a record if we planted anything, and we are going to ask parishes to see if they have their own records of the tree planting in 73. I'm not quite sure where you got your information on this. Can I ask you, please?
Sorry, which piece?
Well, both of them.
I'll try and answer. My recollection was that the elections for Horsham District Council were held in 1973. I believe there was a year when there was a shadow council. The old councils were ran off and the new councils were geared up, and probably 74 was the time when HDC could actually take decisions, but there was an HDC elected in 73. My recollection of Plant a Tree in 73 was that we were out there planting trees in 73. And I think you're right that there isn't a record, there's a central record of where these trees are. And I think it would be a crying shame if we didn't take the opportunity to try and find out where those trees are for future generations. I think it was a big campaign. It was the time when Dutch elm disease was rife. Thousands, millions of trees were being cut down. Plant a Tree in 73 was the campaign to recognise that and to rectify that. And I think we need to try and get a record of it. And I'm sure local history societies will do something.
Okay, well, thank you. I will hand over to Councillor right now, but obviously the proposal and the notice which I gave earlier of the Queen's Green Canopy is going to more than cover the replanting of trees in 22. So we are going to be planting trees at the end of this year, and of course, because trees can only get planted in the winter, it will naturally be end of 22, beginning of 23. And we do want to plant trees everywhere, in every parish, in every neighbourhood council. So I'm sure that the Plant a Tree in 73 will be amply covered by the Jubilee commemorations. But how important it is, I'm going to hand over to Councillor right now.
Well, I don't really need to say anything extra, but I have no recollection of 72 or 73 being well before my time, as you said. For the history lesson, Local Government Act 1972 created the idea of Horsham District Council. We had an election in 73, but officially we were not sort of incarnate till 74. So I think we're going to disagree on what the commemoration is. But regardless, we need no excuse to plant trees. Tony, if you come to my Pdag later this year, we'll be talking about how we're planting lots of trees in addition to the ones we're planting for the Jubilee. So hope that answers your question.
Councillor Beavis, you can ask a supplementary question.
I've no supplementaries other than do you all want to go home, I think.
Thank you very much. In that case, thank you very much for the answers. And that brings us to urgent business. There is no urgent business, so I declare the meeting closed.